גדול, דבר נפלא. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה את החיים על פני האדמה. נתן לך את הלילה והיום, אהבה, תקווה וחלום. קיץ, חורף, סתיו, אביב, נשמה טובה להביט סביב. נתן לך שדות ירוקים, פרחים ועצים מלבלבים, נהרות, נחלים וימים, שמיים, ירח, כוכבים.
אלוהים נתן לך במתנה דבר גדול, דבר נפלא. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה את החיים על פני האדמה. נתן לך חגים ושבתות, את ישראל ארץ האבות, ידיים וראש להגשים חלומות. נתן לך את כל הנפלאות, נתן לך דברים כל כך יפים, להביא לעולם ילדים, להאזין לשירים, לראות צבעים. מה רבו מעשיך אלוהים. במתנה דבר גדול, דבר נפלא. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה את החיים על פני האדמה. אלוהים, תן לי רק עוד מתנה, מתנה קטנה אך נפלאה. אלוהים, תן לי רק עוד מתנה, את השלום על פני האדמה.
הייתי בפריז וגם ברומא, ראיתי את שבעת פלאי תבל, בקוטב הצפוני וגם דרומה, אך אין מקום כמו ארץ ישראל. וכמו גלויות של נוף יפות, תמונות בזיכרוני עפות, כמו בעד עדשה של מצלמה, בתרמילי אותן אסע לכל מקום בכל מסע, קטעי פסיפס מתוך תמונה שלמה. שלום לך ארץ נהדרת, עבדך דל נושא לך שיר מזמור, גם אם לעתים נודד אני על דרך, מה טוב לנדוד אך טוב יותר לחזור. פריחי המגדלים בירושלים, בסמטאות השוק הצבעוני, גגות הרעפים של גבעתיים, הניבטים מבעד חלוני, את האביב בתל אביב, את סבתי ואת סבי, את החלה ואת נרות שבת, את ים המלח מול אדום ואשת לוט צופה לסדום, ואת הקיץ אורחה אליו. שלום לך ארץ נהדרת, עבדך דל נושא לך שיר מזמור, גם אם לעתים נודד אני על דרך, מה טוב לנדוד אך טוב יותר לחזור. מימיה הכחולים של הכנרת והרקיע התואם מעט, והרגשת הבית המוכרת בתוך אורכי זורמת כמו חשמל, הרי גליל והשומרון, הפרדסים שבשרון, וילדים בגן המושבה, את הכרמל ואת הים, אחד אחד ואת כולם תמיד קורצים אומרים ברוך הבא. שלום לך ארץ נהדרת, עבדך דל נושא לך שיר מזמור, גם אם לעתים נודד אני על דרך, מה טוב לנדוד אך טוב יותר לחזור.
אוויר הרים צלול כיין וריח אורנים, נישא ברוח הערביים עם כל פעמונים, ובתרדמת אילן ואבן שבויה בחלומה, העיר אשר בדד יושבת ובליבה חומה. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. איכה יבשו בורות המים, כיכר השוק ריקה, ואין פוקדת הר הבית בעיר העתיקה. ובמערות אשר בסלע והלילות רוחות, ואין יורד אל ים המלח בדרך יריחו. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל
All right, welcome to World Alliance of Qara'im, and let's so have an interesting talk today, and what the rabbis, rabbinite Torah study schedule. Why? Because that's like that's what Jews are in their synagogues, although of course there are different communities and differences between the Sephardi reading and the Ashkenazi reading, and there are other communities have differences as well. But let's stay up to date with what the majority of Jews are doing. We do that thing I've mentioned a number of times. There's nothing canonical about that schedule. We could follow the schedule, there's nothing canonical about even starting the Torah on Simchat as the rabbi. In fact, one could argue that it's probably better started maybe on the 15th, first of the 15th of the first month. That's what we do. So what's the point? The point is that this week, the Rabbinites have kind of a fill-in parasha because it's Shavuot. It was their Shavuot on Thursday night. It's our Shavuot tonight. So they have kind of a fill-in and going out of order. And so I want to take this opportunity to speak about a topic that I thought would be of interest to those who want to. By the way, we're not imagining things. On his shoulder, we found this little guy about a week ago or something like that, and we're just taking care of him. I don't know if we're gonna be able to keep him or not, but he is a little cutie, and he like go up on my shoulder. So if you see a kitten on my shoulder, it's not your imagination. You're not hallucinating. There is actually a kitten on my shoulder. Yes, there is. Okay. So, we're going to be talking today about the idea of the ger. What is that? Well, first, what is a ger in terms of and what is the status of the ger in Israel? And I've said a lot about this okay, I've spoken about the importance of the core of Israel being the actual patrilineal descendants of Jacob. I've misinterpreted that to mean this. I think some of that people have misinterpreted that to mean that I don't think Gerim, or I don't think there's such a thing as quote unquote conversion to Judaism or becoming part of the nation of Israel. No, that's not the case at all. There clearly is. There are specific instances of Gerim in the Tanach. Mrs. Uriah the Hittite, right? The wife of Bathsheba, who David, well, we need to repeat his sins. He was forgiven for them, and and so, but many other examples of Gerim in the Torah, and there are counts of Gerim in the Torah, and we'll talk about. Hopefully, we'll get to all of that. Okay, so I don't want anyone to think that I don't believe personally that Gerim cannot join the nation of Israel. Of course, they can. Okay, that's clear. Okay, I have a problem. I have a number of problems. Okay, first of all, one of the main problems I have is the which certain cities allow Gerim to join the nation of Israel. I don't want to start, mentioning names, but there is one Karaite who kind of goes around and implies that as long as you start Yahweh, as long as you start following the Torah, then you're in a sense, okay, you're already part of Israel. And I think this person has done a lot of damage. He's told people throughout the United States in particular, that, they're Jews and they're now part of the Jewish nation. And it's not simple. They are not really accepted as part of the Jewish nation. And they, after a while, figure this out and they feel like they're left out in the dark and left in the cold. This person seems to be more, he's kind of a narcissist, seems to be more interested in his own self-aggrandizement than actually helping other people. But I'll get into it. We'll leave that, for another time. Then we have, of course, the KJU. They do their conversion program, which I guess is actually somewhat rigorous. I don't know if they're doing it right now. I think they're not doing it at the moment. But at least they require some hoops through if you want to become part. Right? It's not I say oath of root, boom, you're like. So at least it requires some hoops to come through. Are hoops worth anything really? Don't know what the latest general. You get a particular organization from the KJ, it's not going to be worth very much. Jew is not going to accept such a person as a fellow Jew. I don't know what the status in terms of making aliyah. I think they had one person only make aliyah with their certificate. I don't know. I really haven't been keeping up with it, but I did do it, and I think it was pretty much worth. My point was that JU is much worthless unless your goal is to be accepted by people who have also gotten a JU certificate. A couple of Karaite Jews in the United States. Anyway, I don't want to go into Karaite politics, into anything like that. I really want to speak about the status of the Ger and other statuses that are relevant to that status. Okay. So that being said, I would also like to say one more thing, which is that, well, maybe two things. Okay. So the number one thing to say is that there are many people around the world who are waking up, let's say Torah, or waking up to worship of Yahweh, seeing Yahweh as their God. And I have immense respect for such, I don't know, a country like India, which is rampant with politics and all kinds of, nonsense, and decides I'm accept Yahweh as my one and only God. I want the people, and I want to follow the Torah. I have great respect for that. Okay, I really do, and I would say love for such people. It's amazing, right? And it's fulfillment of many end of day prophecies, which imply that return to Yahweh, to knowing His name, to knowing His ways, and to serving Him as their only. However, that being said, not everyone who decides all of a sudden Yahweh is my God, that doesn't necessarily make them a Jew. That doesn't make them an Israelite. That doesn't make them what I nilweh. Okay, I think in the what once translates into English as ally, a common word in this day and age. You support certain agenda, like if the LGBTQ plus whatever agenda, but you're not LGBTQ whatever it is plus, then they call you an ally, right? So I think that nirweh as an ally, but nirweh really means someone who joins themselves to the nation of Israel. Okay, and we'll talk verse where it's about that, and it's not. We'll get to that. Okay, and nirweh is not the same as a ger. Okay, a ger, I always like to say, is related, unique, few, like the chosen, like the elite, chosen in the sense of being better above the others. But let's say a bunch of people join the army and they want to be Air Force pilots. In the end, only a couple are chosen to be Air Force pilots, right? They drop out of the program because they're just not they're not up to snuff. Okay, it's the same way with Ger. It's more than just waking up one day and saying, be part. I want to follow and accept Yahweh as my God. That's wonderful. It's beautiful. But becoming a Ger is more than that. Becoming a Ger really means I like a black belt in Torah, in Yahweh worship, right? You really have to commitment and dedication to it in way or another, right? The class of Ruth, okay, who ultimately became a Gera when Boaz married her, okay? She sacrificed a lot, right? Basically, to go with Naomi back to Israel, right? Having never been there before in her entire life, having no one would face her, having just lost her being a widow, she had no idea what would face Israel, and her part Orpah turned around and did not want it, right? She went back to Moab, or she stayed in Moab. But Ruth decided, this is something in my heart, right? She showed that she was ready to take, extreme sacrifice to join the nation, be part of the nation of Israel. She knew in her heart and in her gut that this is what she wanted to do, that this was her calling in life, right? Therefore, she went ahead and did it, and she was rewarded when Boaz married her. That's when she actually became part of the nation of Israel. Boaz acquired her as a part of Elimelech's inheritance. We've spoken about this a bunch of times. Example, Agera. Okay, wonderful that that people say the Ruthic oath, and maybe they mean it when they say it. I mean, are they really willing to put the sacrifice in? I say this from experience, and I've been doing this Karaite thing for over 20 years, and I have come across a lot of people who have said, "Oh, I want to be Jewish. I want to be part of Israel. I want to follow Torah." And I've seen time and time that they start doing it, and then after a year, they're kind of not into it so much anymore. And then after 2 years, maybe they're not even, Jewish anymore. And then maybe they don't even Jewish anymore. Maybe they Muslim, or they've reverted to Christianity, or they've become God knows what, right? Or they become, I don't know. There's all kinds of different permutations. I've seen it again and again that people come with great zeal, right? But I would say a large majority, honestly, really don't have the staying power. They're really not into it, okay? And it's like the flavor of the month. And the flavor of the month, then they want to move on to something else, right? And that's not a ger. A ger is someone who wants to make his commitment and has proven himself ready for commitment for his entire life, that he or she wants to be 100% part of Israel. Okay? Being ultimately moving to the land of Israel. Now, I guess it's a bit more confusing because even the nation of Israel itself doesn't live in the land of Israel. So how can you require a ger to move to the land of Israel when Jews themselves don't live in the land of Israel? Educated, but being ready to make some kind of very extreme sacrifice, basically to show that they are willing to be a black in Judaism, in being part of the nation. Not everyone makes it to the level of black belt. Only very few do. Okay, just likewise, not everyone expresses interest in Torah or expresses in being a nation. This is our and is ready to put up with all the obstacles to do so. Right, a lot drop out along the way, just like a lot of people who want to get into become fighter pilots. Thrown out, right? So that's the way I see a ger. A ger is someone who has an extreme commitment to be a permanent part of the nation of Israel, and we see this borne out in the Torah, right? That gerim are basically people who are permanent members of the nation of Israel. They basically permanently it's the nation of Israel themselves, and descendants are now to the nation of Israel. Okay. Another question arises, which is, what is their status in the nation of Israel, right? So the rabbis come and basically say, once a ger, converts, quote, I'm just using lens, and then they are indistinguishable. They're indistinguishable at that point from a native-born Israelite, from someone who can trace his lineage back to Jacob. Not that anyone can trace their lineage back to Jacob. I'm just speaking theoretically, okay? But is that really the case, right? The rabbis. That's what the rabbis say, right? The rabbis say there's no distinction between the ger and the native-born Israelite, and that's kind of what their that's what their approach, that's what their philosophy is based on. Okay. Well, I would say that they had an agenda in doing such a thing. Okay, their agenda was basically it was to the lines of who was an Israelite and who was not Israelite, so that they could take the nation of Israel from the rightful nation, who are basically the Levites, the prophets, the judge, the kings of the line of David, and then the three sons, really the two sons position of first in Yaakov. First of all, be Joseph, the two tribes, Ephraim and Menashe, and who also ascended, shall we say, secondary firm, right? I've spoken about this a lot before, but Reuven, Levi, Shimon were kicked off their thrones for various reasons as being firstborn. The fourth born of Leah was Yehuda, so he basically moves into the firstborn position, and that later he is, I think, that later on his is given to a descendant of Yehuda. On the other hand, we have the of Rachel, of Rachel, who was Joseph. That was Joseph basically becomes the first of Yaakov. Yaakov is on his deathbed, blessing to Ephraim, and says that they will be considered as if, or they will be called by the rest of my children. I can't remember the exact phrase. I could go look it up. But right, what it means is that Ephraim are now elevated of full-fledged tribe. Sometimes they're called a half tribe, full-fledged tribe, basically, and they're elevated up to the level of the other sons of when in terms of inheritance, in terms of status, right? And we know this because the firstborn gets double portion. Just the portion, that portion was into two tribes, Ephraim and Menashe, represents the double. So Joseph was basically the real firstborn of Yaakov, because Yaakov did not want any other wife other than Rachel, right? So the firstborn had no wives and concubines. Then Joseph would have been born. Of course, we can't work retroactively in history, but you know what I'm saying, right? Joseph would have been the firstborn of Jacob, and so that's really all Yaakov ever wanted. He only wanted to marry. He was kind of marrying Leah, and concubines came along with Leah and Rachel. And then when Leah and Rachel couldn't have children, then they basically, duped, but him to have relations with the concubines, and so he had a whole lot more children than he ever did do, probably. But okay, so how do we get into this? I forgot, but my point that I think what I wanted to say is that everyone in Israel has a particular place, has a particular status, has a particular rank. Okay, yes, Levite, both the Levite and the son of Naphtali, or the descendant of Naphtali, are part of the nation of Israel. Okay, but there's a specific rank there. Okay, the Levite is at a higher rank in the nation of Israel than, let's say, the descendants of Naphtali. The Kohanim are at a higher rank. More, I like to use the idea of concentric circles. They're at a more inner concentric circle than, let's say, the descendant of the concubines. Okay, that's just the way it is, right? One thing that's very clear throughout the Torah is we see that everyone has their place, everyone has their rank, everyone knows exactly what the picture is, where they fit into the big picture, and that's fine. That's the thing, I think, because at the end of the day, we're all in life is kind of, you're supposed to be in life is kind of essence, right? If I don't know, Naphtali, the head of being the head of Israel, maybe just would not have been appropriate for them, and it would not have been appropriate for the nation of Israel. So everyone in Israel has their place, everyone has their status. It's almost like your name, your rank, and your serial number. Okay, that's kind of the way it works. And how does it relate to the Gerim? So the Gerim puts itself out in the text of the Torah and the Tanach. The Gerim are part of the nation of Israel, but they have their status. Their status is Ger. That's who they are. Okay, they just cannot trace their lineage back to Jacob, their patrilineal. It's just the way it is. Okay, so yes, they're part of the nation of Israel. We see this explicitly in various passages. Okay, but their rank is and the circles. They're kind of on the outer concentric circle of the nation of Israel. Okay, so if we talk about who's in the concentric, okay, we could speak about the Kohanim and the house of David and his descendants. Okay, the Kohanim, in the sense that they are the head of the cultic worship of Yahweh, and David, he's kind of the head of the political leadership of the nation of Israel. Okay, so towards that center are the prophets. Originally, in the time of the judges, prophet and judge were one and the same. Basically, all of the judges were prophet. When Israel then he was taken away from the kings, he's had accompanying prophets. Okay, the kings were not prophets themselves, but they had prophets who accompanied, and so the prophets are also kind of near that inner circle. They're in leadership of the nation of Israel, but they're assistants, they're advisors to the kings. As we out from that inner, from the move out towards the Levites, okay, and move out towards the tribes, okay. In again order and there is a specific order of rank mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. Okay, at the top of the hierarchy are the descendants of Joseph, who was split into two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh, and also the descendants of Yehuda, specifically through the and then as you move out, then you could the other children of Rachel, who is only one other child, Benjamin, Binyamin, and the other children of Leah, and then on the more outer concentric circle, the concubines, Zilpah and Bilhah and Zilpah, and then on the most outer circle, you could say you have the okay, the team are those who affix themselves in the nation of Israel. They're part of the nation of Israel, but they're definitely on that concentric circle. Okay. All that being said, I think that kind of sums up where I'm coming from. So let me summarize. Okay, the Ger is definitely part of the nation, without a doubt. But like everyone else in Israel, he has his name, his rank, and his position within the nation of Israel. Okay. Number two, not everyone who wakes up one day and decides they want to be considered a Ger, a black belt in karate. Some people start learning karate, but only very achieve the level of black belt. Okay. A Ger is someone who achieves the level of black belt. Okay. And by the way, Phil, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, so who knows? Maybe you could claim to be a Ger, right? Game for a long time. I've known you for years. You're not just like one of those people who goes through the flavor. It's something you've been into for a long time. At any rate, neither here nor there. Okay, and the three thing I'll say is that I have immense respect, for those people in the world who decide that leave religion they were, or atheism, or whatever their philosophy was before, and decide that they want Yahweh as their God, and they want to they want to be either Gerim, or they want to be allies, supporters from the outside, Niluim. I have respect and love for such people. It are amazing people I've met who fall into that category. However, not everyone who wakes up one day and decides, I want to follow Yahweh and I want to get myself close to the nation of Israel. Not everyone, not those people, opinion is a Ger. Okay, Ger is someone who really proved, like Ruth did, that they're ready to jump through a lot of hoops, and they're ready to really make this, dedicate their entire life to this, make sacrifice, and stick to this, until the day they die. Okay, that's another point. And I guess kind of sums up where I believe things are. Okay, but let's dig in. Okay, this is a huge topic in the Torah, in the Tanach, and I'm learning something new. Who knows? Maybe I'm going to see something that I didn't see before. And so with that being said, I want to start digging into the text. And in order to do so, I'm going to stop the screen and present differently here. Window, Torah, and I've got to do this. There we go. That's our usually window and a window and a window setup, which I hate, but okay. I think I have a solution, which okay. So that being said, to dig in, I think to do that, start looking at go to the instances of Ger, so here, and we can get an idea of what this means, and specifically in regards to when it's used in context of the people of Israel, okay? So again, okay, see here the instance in Genesis chapter 15, verse 30 is what's called the Brit Ben Abitarim, or the covenant of the split. Right? And in order to look at that, well, now it's a second. Okay. All right. This is a little bit late. To the English, and we're going to Genesis 13. So here's Abram. He's still Abram, right? and I think in order to center. Okay, at any rate, I want to 13 English here. So in Genesis chapter 13, in fact, let me. Okay, and it says here, then Yahweh said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. Okay, so if we look at the Hebrew on that one, oh, what is wrong with this stupid thing? I don't know, the website is acting a bit strange. Hold on, let's try this again. There we go. So if we look at the Hebrew on that one, it says, what Yomer le'Avram, so God said to Abram, Yado teda, you must certainly know, ki ger zaracha be'eretz lo lehem, that your descendants, literally your seed, shall be gerim, shall be a ger in a land that is not theirs. Ve'avdum ve'inu otam, and they shall enslave them, and they shall oppress them for 400 years, okay, or 400 years, okay? So this is the phrase here, Ger zaracha be'eretz lo lehem, okay? Your seed shall be a ger in a land that is not to them, that is not theirs, okay? And we see the first instance of the word ger here, okay? And it's usually translated as stranger, foreigner, sojourner, okay? Let's see here, Strong's translates it as sojourner, BDB, which usually is where Strong's gets its translations from. It also says sojourner, okay? And the idea here is that it's a kind of a temporary, well, here we go, right? Sojourner, temporary dweller, newcomer, no inherited rights, okay? As opposed to homeborn, okay? It's someone who is living in a place for a while, or is living in a place that is not really theirs. That's the idea, okay? It's basically someone who's an immigrant, shall we say, right? Either temporarily, or in the case of, as we'll see later when we're talking about a ger to the nation of Israel, you know, someone who permanently attaches themselves to the nation of Israel, okay? But that's it's breaking up. Okay, hold on a second. I think I might have a solution. No. Oh, on your end. Okay. Is it okay now, by the way? Can you hear me okay now, Phil? Okay. You can hear okay now? All right, I'll assume. Okay, so right, so we see here the first instance of the word ger, ger implying that they're right, a stranger, a sojourner, a temporary dweller, being in a place that's not yours. Okay, that's the idea of a ger. Okay, let's pick that up. Oops. Let's see where we can go to from here. Okay, let's look at Genesis 23:4. That's a good one. So in Genesis 23:4, oh, this thing's acting weird again. Let's try that again. Genesis 23:4. Maybe I should go back to the other network. Oh, come on now. Jeez. Hold on a second here. Oh, we can do it this way. What the heck is going on here? Ah, come on. Try one more time. Sometimes the site acts a little bit strange. It is acting strange indeed. All right, let me go back to the other network. I think that's what's... Come on now. One second. Now I'll have to do this a different way. It's acting strange. All right, let's try here. I don't know. All right, let's do it in Safari then. Hold on a second. So Tanach, Genesis, what do we say? 23:4. Okay. Okay. So this is Abraham in Genesis 23. Sarah has just died, and Abraham wants to purchase his he wants to purchase land from Ephron, the Hittite, from a Hittite to bury his deceased wife, right? And so he goes. We'll start here, okay? And we're in Genesis 23, verse 3. Oops. V'yakam Avraham me'al pnei meto. Maybe I should make this a little bit larger. V'yakam Avraham me'al pnei meto v'yidaber el bnei het lemor. So Abraham arose from before the face of his dead, in other words, from mourning. V'yidaber el bnei het lemor. And he spoke to the children of Het, the Hittites, okay? And said, and this is what he says to them, Ger with Toshav Anochi imachem. I am a Ger and a Toshav. Okay, I'll just translate those in a second. Ger and Toshav, I am with you. Tnuli achuzat kever. Give me a parcel of land, which is actually a bad translation. How do they say? They translate here as a burial site, but literally it means achuzat means a holding. Lachuz means to hold. Okay, so a land holding for a grave imachem with you. Okay. And let me bury my dead from away from me, from before me. Okay. So what is Abraham saying to the Hittites? Okay, he's saying I'm a stranger, I'm a sojourner. This is not really my land. At least it's not going to be yet, right? In contrast to what we saw in Genesis 15, we know that eventually this will be the land of the descendants of Abraham, or at least the descendants of Abraham through Isaac and Jacob. But at this point, it's not his land. He's just a sojourner there, right? We still have the Canaanites living there. and the rest of the nations, right? So he says, Ger Toshav anochi imachem. Okay, I am a ger, okay, a sojourner, or a stranger, or a temporary resident. Here they translate it as resident alien among you. Okay, well, actually they're translating Ger Toshav, but I think that's a bad translation. Okay, Ger Toshav. These are two different words. Okay. Even though they're joined together here, but they're really two different words. We know that from the vav, which means and. So ger is a sojourner, a stranger, a temporary resident, and a toshav is a, how would you say toshav in English? You would say a settler or something like that. Okay, toshav comes from the word yashav, yoshev, which means to sit. So to sit, to settle. Right, I'm a temporary resident and a settler with you. Okay, right. This is not my land. At least it is not yet. Right, I'm just a stranger here. Okay, I'm a temporary resident and a settler, temporary settler with you. Okay, and by the way, this is a very sneaky translation. We'll talk about it more. Okay, because the rabbis believe that this is a specific phrase, ger toshav, but it's not. It's ger toshav. We'll talk about that more later. Okay. I'm a temporary resident and a settler with you, right? Just like someone's living in a tent with you, kind of. Okay. Tnuli achuzat kever. Give me a land holding for a grave, right? And this is an important word, I think. Achuzat again comes from, oh God, what is it? Bringing up this thing? From achuzat comes from le'echoz, which means to grasp onto, to permanently own, right? So what is Abraham saying here? He's saying, I don't own anything in this land. I'm just passing through, right? I'm like a stranger. I'm a temporary, I'm like someone who's just passing through, and I would like a permanent land holding, okay, in this land so that I may bury my dead. And this is very interesting, but this is actually the initial possession, right? And this is already coming in the time of Abraham. This is actually the initial possession that our ancestors took of the land of Israel. This is the first possession that our ancestors, specifically Abraham, took in the land of Israel. This is the first thing that turned Abraham from being a ger in the land of Israel to having an actual permanent land holding in the land of Israel. And that's when he buys the cave in the field of Machpelah, or they just call it Machpelah, from Ephron the Hittite. Okay, so this verse here represents the transformation of Abraham from being just a ger, a settler, and a passer through, a stranger, a temporary resident in the land of Israel, to actually getting his first land holding within the land of Israel. Of course, that's not going to really be fulfilled until the children of Israel come out of Egypt 400 years later. But at any rate, it just shows that distinction. Okay, let's move on. Actually, just give me 1 second. I want to grab some water. My throat is a little bit dry. Oh, you found Lavi? He's going to get upset because Shon's here. Well, I got to do this now, okay? You're disturbing me, okay? It's not the time right now. I got to do this now, okay? I got to do this now. I'm sorry, okay? Can't interrupt me in the middle of the study. Okay, so any questions, any comments so far? Everything pretty clear? You have to take this action out of here. Hello? Excuse me. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, I'm back. So, all right, let's move on now to. So that's it. Those are the only two appearances of the word ger in Genesis. Now we're going to move on to Exodus. Exodus chapter 2. And this is, of course, with Moses. Let's open that up. Let's see, this website is working again. It seems to be acting strange still, but okay. We'll use Faria if we need to, and it's acting strange. Okay, we'll use Faria. So we're talking about Exodus 2:22. So we go to Faria, we go to Tanach, Exodus 2, and then we go to 22. So first of all, just to get the context here, let's see if I can make it happen in English. Got it. Genesis, NIV, Exodus 2. Okay, so this is Moses is born. Moses gets into trouble. Moses flees to Midian, right? So that's what's going on here, right? These are the verses we're looking at right here, and I'll just read the English, I suppose, first. Okay, so Moses arrives in Midian. He ends up marrying Zipporah, the son, not the son, the daughter of. Hey, it's not modern America, right? The daughter of Jethro. All right, Uel he's called. He has a number of different names. Okay, and it says here, we'll pick it up in Exodus 2:21. Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, "I've become a foreigner in a foreign land." Let's take a look at that in the Hebrew. So Exodus 2:21. Shoham, what are you doing, sweetheart? This little cat is such a cutie. Oh my God, are you cute? Oh my God, are you cute? 2:21. Okay. So Moses consented to stay with the man and gave Moses' daughter Zipporah as wife, and we pick it up here in 2:22. Okay. So when Moses is living in Midian, married to Zipporah, v'tiled ben, and she gave birth to a son, v'yikra et shemo, and he called his name. So she gave birth to a son, but Moshe named him, right? V'yikra. Yikra is the masculine form of the verb. V'yikra et shemo Gershom. And whenever I let go of this, it opens that stupid thing. Okay. V'yikra et shemo Gershom, and he named him Gershom. Ki amar ger hayiti be'eretz nochriya, because he said, I was a ger in a foreign land. I was a stranger in a strange land. Okay. Isn't that from what is that song? Is that the Boney M song? Is he a stranger? I don't know. I can't remember. Okay. So at any rate, we see that the name of Moshe's son is Gershom, and Gershom really means Ger Sham. Okay. Ger Haiti be'eretz nochriya. Okay. I was a stranger there. Okay. Again, we see this theme coming up again and again, that the word ger means being in a place that's not yours. Okay. Living in a place that's not your homeland. Okay. Being in a place that's far away from you. Okay. If let's say you were born in the United States and I don't know, you took a boat one day and you got lost at sea and you ended up in, I don't know, the Canary Islands or something like that, and you wanted to get back to the United States, but you were stuck in the Canary Islands, then you would be a ger in the Canary Islands, unless you decided, hey, this place is much better than the United States, which is falling apart at the seams and is going to implode at some time in the near future, probably. I'll just stay in the Canary Islands and forget the U.S. I want to be a Canary Islander. Okay, so so that is that. I was going to give the etymology of the word of the name Canary Islands, but I won't get into it right now. Okay. At any rate, so right, so we see that same thing, that same theme. Okay, Abraham was told that his descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs in Genesis 15. In Genesis 23, Abraham, who is a stranger at that point in the land of Canaan, okay, says that he's a stranger and a settler in this land. Okay. Stranger and a sojourner in this land, a stranger and a settler in this land, and he asks for permanent land holding in that land so he can bury his wife. Little did the Hittites know that would be his land possession, which in a sense would be like an anchor for his descendants, right? It was kind of a symbolic anchor for his descendants many generations later, who would come back and take over that land. In fact, until the Israelites take over that land, right, the Marat Machpelah, the cave of Machpelah and the associated field that Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite, becomes basically the focal point of the Israelites holding in the land of Israel, right? That kind of becomes their focal point. Okay, so a lot more to say about that, but I don't want to get into it right now because I want to start moving ahead. Okay. Any questions? Any comments so far? Shabbat shalom, Marianana, Miknana, Banana. Oh, Ariella and Ben want to come in. Hello, Ariella and Ben. Hey guys, nice to see you. All right.
How you doing? It's good to see you.
Doing good, doing good. How you guys doing? How's Bat Yam these days?
Hot, sticky, and and dusty. Actually, I think we're getting a lot of dust from Mount Etna.
Oh.
It's either that or the Habub coming up from the Sahara.
Okay, sounds lovely.
Yeah, we'll keep it. I know.
Have you guys been following along? You just came in right now.
Unfortunately, we just got in. Unfortunately.
Okay. All right. So maybe I'll try to recap afterwards. But we're speaking about the meaning of the word ger. Okay, and we've seen so far a number of instances. We've seen Abraham being told by God in Genesis 15 that his descendants will be gerim. There will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, meaning in Egypt. Then we see later on in Genesis chapter 23 that Abraham says he goes to the Hittites and he says, "I'm a stranger and a settler in this land, and would you please give me a permanent land holding in this land so I can bury my dead wife Sarah?" Right. So we see this theme again and again, and now we're up to Moses, right? Who's just named he's just been given he's just taken Zipporah as his wife, and then he gives birth to a son, and he names that son Gershom, right? Which means literally Ger Sham, okay, a stranger there, okay. And he says he names him Gershom because where's the Hebrew? Okay, because he said. Yeah. Because he said, I am a stranger in a strange land. Okay, Ger Haiti be'eretz nochria. Okay, I don't know why this stupid thing keeps on coming up. But okay, so that's where we are. So we see this theme over and over and again that the word ger really means being in a place that was not originally yours, being away from your homeland, being away from the place you were born, the people among who you were born, and being in a place that's a new, strange place to you. And it also implies the idea of not living there permanently, but of staying there temporarily, at least so far in what we've seen. When we speak about a ger in regards to the nation of Israel, then it's going to be quite the opposite. A ger is not someone who's a temporary sojourner. It's someone who permanently changes their position, their place where they live, and the nation to which they belong. Okay, so that being said, that is Exodus 2:22. We could speak very quickly about Exodus 12:48. Let's do that, even though that's kind of jumping ahead in terms of the theme. But let's just take a look at it very quickly. So it's going to be Exodus 12. So in Exodus 12, we have the laws for the Passover offering. So Exodus 12 is the chapter in which the Israelites flee Egypt. They leave Egypt. And so here's where they actually leave. And then we have laws for the Passover offering in subsequent years. Okay. Let's see one thing here. Right. Okay. So we'll pick that up in, let's look at the Hebrew here. Let's see if this Hebrew is working for this thing now. I'll use Safaria. I think it's not. Something wrong with this website today. I'll give it one more try. No, it's not working. So let's go to Safaria. So we want Exodus 12. So we go to Exodus. Oops. Tanach, Exodus chapter 12. And let's scroll down. Okay. Okay, so we have here in verse 43. I'm sorry, 1 second. Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Okay, I'll look after the cats. Don't worry. All right. So we have in Exodus chapter 43. I don't know. Take whatever you want. I got to do this now. Okay. You admit? Then we don't have. Okay. I got to do. All right. So we have in Exodus 12:43. Okay. ويمر يهوه el Moshe وآرون. Zot chukat Pasach. This is the law of the Passover offering for future Passovers. Called ben nechar lo yochal bo. Anyone who is a foreigner cannot eat of it. Okay, so anyone who has no connection whatsoever to the people of Israel cannot eat of it. Okay, then we're told, okay, bye, see you later. Okay, bye, see you later. All right. Okay, v'chol eved ish miknat kasef v'mantauto az yochal bo. But anyone, I'm going to paraphrase here, anyone who is a purchased slave, right? There was slavery back in those days, and the Torah speaks about it a fair amount, okay? So anyone who's a purchased slave, meaning if it's an Israelite has purchased a foreigner as a slave or conquered a slave in war, ostensibly, although here it specifically says purchased a foreign slave, if you circumcise him, he may eat of it, okay? If you circumcise it, he may eat of it. So basically what this verse is saying is that a slave who is circumcised basically attains the status of ger, right? This is because, and let's think about why, okay? A slave, the way that slavery worked in ancient times and in Israel, right? Who they were part of the culture of the surrounding nations, okay? Is when you acquired a slave either by purchasing the slave or by conquering people in war and taking them as slaves, they became a permanent part of your household. Not only did they become a permanent part of their household, but their descendants became a permanent part of, their household, of your household as well, right? So if you purchase a slave, his children are part of your household. His children's children are part of your household. They basically are permanent attachments to your household. So basically, they're no longer sojourners. They're no longer just passing through, right? They now become a permanent part of Israel, and in fact, they in a sense become a ger. They become a convert. They become part of the nation of Israel. So much so, right? It's really kind of an amazing thing, right? And we just see again, there's a lot of scholars who like to say that the Torah did not or does not allow for the proper treatment of slaves, but that's absolutely not true. Okay, the Torah was very kind even to non-Israelite slaves, especially kind to Israelite slaves, but kind even to non-Israelite slaves. There are a number of laws which give them their freedom, right? For instance, if they're injured or if they run away, and so we see that the slave. Well, that's a whole different topic, but we see that the slave was not really mistreated. Okay. However, so much so here that we see in verse 44 that a slave, okay, if he's circumcised, he's now able to eat the Passover offering, okay, which is an amazing thing. What is the Passover offering? The Passover offering is the commemoration of the exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt, okay? Oh, I'm sorry, little baby. We found this little kitten about a week ago. Come here, Sean. And right, so a slave can now partake of the Passover offering. That's really an amazing thing, right? Because the only people who really should have any part in taking part in the Passover offering are Israelites, right? What is some slave? If I'm an ancient Israelite and I purchase a slave from a faraway nation, okay, I don't know, I'll just say China, let's say, right? I purchase a slave from China. What does that Chinese person, what does he have anything to do with the exodus from Egypt, right? He didn't experience it. His ancestors didn't experience it. Yet, if he's circumcised, that's his symbol that he's now a permanent part of the Israelite household, right? And he's actually able to eat of the Passover sacrifice, which is really an incredible sign that he's a permanent part of the nation of Israel, right? It's almost as if he's commemorating the Exodus along with the people of Israel to which he is now joined. Okay. All right. They had a room, board, and a job. Not a bad deal. Okay, I got to tell you guys a funny story. Okay, absolute true story. Okay, I've told the story probably many times. I might have even told it, in one of the Shabbat studies. But in Jerusalem, there's a bunch of people. There are no shortage of people who have what's called Jerusalem syndrome. Oh, you guys are back.
Yeah, sorry about that. I turned the computer on and it died on us straight away. Sorry about that. But we got back.
No problem.
We're back now. We're anxious to hear about the Jerusalem syndrome as opposed to the Bat Yam syndrome.
You're gonna love this story. Yeah, right. You got one there with Bat Yam syndrome. We won't get into that. Okay. All right. So right. So right. There's no shortage of people in Jerusalem who believe they're the Messiah, and I knew this one guy. He was an interesting feller, and when I would go down to the center of Jerusalem, I would always sit down and talk to him because he was, interesting in a weird kind of way. And his name, he'd actually changed his name on his driver's license. He had a Florida driver's license, and he'd changed his name on the Florida license to David ben Hamelech David, which means David, the son of King David. Okay, and this guy was full-fledged Jerusalem syndrome. There was no choice. There was no question whatsoever that he was the Mashiach, and he made it clear to everybody that this was the case. Okay, so one day I was sitting down with him, and I said to him, "Listen, if you're the Messiah, okay, you want me to accept you as the Messiah, okay, you've got to. Why don't you prove it to me? Okay, give me some kind of sign, give me some kind of proof." And he says, "How do you want me to prove it to you?" And I said, "Okay, well, make a prophecy. Okay, since you're the Messiah, obviously you're a prophet, right? Make a prophecy, and let's see if it comes true." Okay. And he says, "Okay, no problem." He says, "Okay, my prophecy is that," and this is what he said. He said, "Tel Aviv," I think this was the year 2005 or something like that. "Tel Aviv will be destroyed by nuclear weapons this year." Okay. And I said, "Okay, I'm not looking forward to that, but if that's your prophecy, that's your prophecy. Okay, I'll tell you what, if it comes true, I'll accept you as the Messiah. And if it doesn't, then you have to admit that you're not the Messiah." Okay, and he said, "Okay, no problem." So we waited for a while. Tel Aviv obviously did not get nuked, not yet anyway. And I went back to him and I said to him, "Listen, your prophecy did not come true. You're a false prophet. You're not the Messiah, right? What do you have to say about that?" And he says to me, "Aha, you don't realize what I realized. Tel Aviv was nuked." I said to him, what are you talking about? What do you mean Tel Aviv was nuked? I just went to Tel Aviv 3 days ago. It wasn't nuked, all right? He says, "You're talking about on the physical realm. In the spiritual realm, Tel Aviv was nuked. Spiritual Tel Aviv was nuked, okay? And so therefore, I'm the Messiah, and you have to accept me as the Messiah, okay? All right, well, that's not the end of the story." I said, "All right, you got me on that one, okay? I didn't see that one coming, so I'm not going to quite accept you as Messiah yet. I want you to give me another prophecy with something here on this physical earth, okay, that I could see with my own eyes, okay, whether it comes true or not, okay? And then this time we're gonna make it 100% clear." And I remember we actually wrote out a contract, okay, and the contract was that the prophecy, we put the prophecy in this written contract, which was his prophecy was that Yasser Arafat would ascend the Temple Mount by Rosh Hashanah of that year. I think it was like 2005 or something like that, or maybe 2006. I don't remember. Okay, Yasser Arafat would ascend the Temple Mount by Rosh Hashanah of 2005. We'll say. Okay, and we put it in writing, and we put the stipulations of the contract. If this prophecy comes true, I will accept you as Messiah. Of course, I knew it wasn't going to come true, so I didn't have too much to worry about. And if it doesn't come true, then you have to admit you're not the Messiah, and you have to be my slave for life. Okay? And he said, "Okay, no problem." And we signed it. We actually signed our signatures. We waited for Rosh Hashanah, and Yasser Arafat did not ascend the Temple Mount. Right? And I went back to him and I said, with the contract in hand, I said, "Listen, here it is. It's all in writing. We're not talking about, spiritual Tel Aviv or spiritual Yasser Arafat ascending the spiritual Temple Mount. We're talking about something in the physical world that you prophesied would happen, and it didn't happen. Okay, now you have to admit that you're not the Messiah, and you have to become my slave for life." Okay, I was obviously kind of half fooling around with him because he was, an interesting character, right? He says, "Okay, fine. I admit it. Okay, I'll admit that I'm not Messiah, and now if you want to take me on as your slave for life, okay, you have to give me a home, you have to provide me with food, you have to find me a wife, okay, and then I'm your slave for life. And I said, okay, you're free, go. At any rate, that's just relating to Phil's comment there that they had a room, board, and a job. Not a bad deal. At any rate.
Did you have to pay him to let him go?
No, and I just gave him his freedom.
Yeah, that was very kind of you. I'd have bought him a Starbucks at least.
Put that guy up in my house. No, thank you. I could tell you about another Mashiach story where it was this guy again, and he was saying he was the Messiah. And I always like to tell this story as well. He was saying he was the Messiah, and then some other guy sits down and says to him, "You're not the Messiah. What are you talking about? You're a false Messiah." And so this guy, David Ben Amelch David, says, "No, I'm the true Messiah. What do you mean I'm false Messiah? What proof do you have that I'm the false Messiah?" And the other guy says, "Well, you can't be the Messiah because I'm the Messiah." And I'm looking at this argument, and I said, "Oh no, this is a real Jerusalem moment. Two people, arguing over, both of who think they're the Messiah, saying that the other one can't be the Messiah because he's the Messiah." Okay. To make a long story short, this argument escalated and escalated and escalated, and it actually turned into a fist fight between this guy and the other Messiah. And I'm sitting there on Ben Yehuda Street, the center of Jerusalem, and I'm watching this. I'm watching two people who say they're the Messiah, the Prince of Peace, right, the King of Peace, and they're sitting there fist fighting with each other in the center of Jerusalem over who's the Messiah. Only in Jerusalem could these kinds of things happen. Any rate, okay. So, getting back to Exodus, so we're talking about how a slave purchased by an Israelite can actually take part in the Passover offering. And in a sense, it's clear from the context that, in my opinion, that basically means that he is a ger. He basically has a status of ger. Yes, he has a status of slave, but he's now a permanent part of the nation of Israel, because it says that no one who's a ben nechar, no one who's a foreigner, okay, can take part in it. Stop opening. No one who's a foreigner, right, can take part in the Passover offering. And also it says here in verse 45, Toshav v'sachir lo yochal bo. Okay, a Toshav and a Sachir. And a Toshav, we saw this word before. We saw this word in Exodus chapter 23. Let's see if this is working now. Probably not. We'll give it a shot. Oops, I've got to go to Hebrew. No, it's selecting weird. Okay. At any rate, we saw in Exodus chapter 23 that Abraham says to the Hittites, okay, he says, Ger Toshav Anochi, okay? Well, actually, I do want to look at it in Hebrew for 1 second. Let's do it this way. What's Faria? Do it. Tanach. Did I say Exodus 23? I mean Genesis 23. Okay. Ger v'toshav anochi imachem. Okay. I am a sojourner and a settler, or a temporary resident among you. Okay. Give me a land holding for a grave site, for a burial site with you, so that I may bury my dead, meaning Sarah, from before me, right? So ger v'toshav, these are two different words. Ger v'toshav, a sojourner and a settler, or a resident, shall we say, okay? And we see that again here in Exodus 12:45, that toshav and a sachir lo yochal bo, okay? We're talking about here the Passover sacrifice, okay? A toshav and a sachir lo yochal bo. So what is a toshav and what is a sachir, okay? A toshav is, well, I like to say that a toshav is like a permanent resident or a green card holder, but not someone who has become a permanent part of the nation, right? I always make the analogy of a green card holder when speaking about a toshav. Okay, it's someone who lives in this case in Israel for an extended period of time, but he's not planning to live there forever. He's not made a permanent commitment to be part of the nation of Israel for himself and his descendants forever. Okay, he's there. Okay, it's kind of like let's say maybe an example would be, I don't know, I don't want to use the Arabs, maybe like an Armenian, right? Because the Arabs are explicitly, the enemies of Israel at this point in time. But let's say the Armenians that live in Jerusalem, they're like a toshav, right? They're not part of the nation of Israel. Okay, they're not they're not Jewish. They're actually Christian. Okay, but they live in the land of Israel, and they've lived there for a long time. Okay, they're like kind of green card holders. Okay, actually, I think officially they have citizenship, but that's besides the point. Their status within Israel is they don't celebrate the Jewish holidays. Okay, they don't follow the Torah. Right? They're Christians. Right? They do their own thing, but they live in the land of Israel. That's a toshav. It's like a long-term resident. Okay, or maybe someone who is but let me just think for a second. How do I always give the analogy? No, I think it's like someone who's on a work visa, more something like that would be the better analogy. Wait, how do I always do it? I say a ger, it's like a green card. No, a ger is, I don't know. I can't remember the analogy. It'll come to me, okay? At any rate, that's what a toshav is. And a sachir is literally a salaried worker, okay? It's kind of like a day laborer or a seasonal laborer, okay? So it's someone who maybe comes to Israel just for the harvest season, partakes in the harvest and goes back to his own land. Okay, that's safir. So these are people who are in the land of Israel, but they're not permanent parts of the nation of Israel. And it says lo yochalbo. Okay, they're not allowed to eat of it. Of what? Of the Passover offering. Okay, they're not allowed to partake in the Passover offering. So we see that a ben nechar, someone who has no connection whatsoever to the people of Israel, please stop doing that, is not allowed to take part in the Passover offering. Okay, someone who is like on a B1 visa, on a work visa, or someone who's on a seasonal laborer. Maybe this would be the green card holder, and this would be the seasonal laborer. Okay, they're not allowed to take part in the Passover offering, right? Because they're not planning to stay there in Israel forever, right? They're staying there for in the first case maybe for 5 years. And in the second case, they're staying maybe just for a season and then coming back, the next harvest season or something like that, right? So they have no permanent status or no permanent place in the nation of Israel. So they don't lo yochalbo. Okay, they don't eat the Passover offering. Okay, just leave that thing open. No, it's driving me crazy. Okay. However, we see that in a slave, an eved ish miknat kesef, an eved who was purchased with money, as long as he's circumcised, or if he's circumcised, then he's allowed to eat of the Passover offering. Okay, so a slave is allowed to eat of the Passover offering because he becomes a permanent part of the nation of Israel, and basically his status is ger. Just like the ger has to be circumcised, so the slave who's going to be a permanent member of the nation of Israel, if he's circumcised or when he's circumcised, then essentially becomes part of the nation of Israel as a eved, as a slave, or perhaps as a status of ger, as someone who came from another nation and now is permanent part of the nation of Israel, and he's actually allowed to eat of the Passover offering. Okay, so whereas a complete foreigner, okay, a green card holder and a B1 visa holder are not allowed to eat of the Passover offering because they've not permanently thrown their lot in, or not permanent part of the nation of Israel. A slave who had no choice but to be brought to Israel against his own will because he was purchased, right, now becomes a permanent part of the nation of Israel, and as long as he's circumcised, or when he's circumcised, he may eat of the Passover offering. Okay, and that's kind of an amazing thing. Okay, and now we have the same rule. And how do we know that the slave is kind of has the same status with respect to the Passover offering as ger, or maybe not even with respect to the Passover offering, with respect maybe to all the laws, as essentially the same status within the nation of Israel as a ger? We see here in verse 48, "V'chi yagur itcha ger." Okay. And if a stranger, a sojourner, okay, a ger should live with you, okay, V'sapa Pesach liYahweh, and wishes to bring the Passover offering to Yahweh, okay, Himolo kol zachar, he must circumcise all of the males in his household, including himself, right, just like the slave. has to be circumcised, we saw, okay? And then he may approach to do it, okay? And he becomes like the native born of the land. He becomes like a native born Israelite. He becomes like an actual Israelite with respect to what? The context here is with respect to the Passover offering, okay? In other words, if someone comes from a foreign land, okay, and decides, I want to permanently I want to permanently stay here. I want to join myself permanently to the nation of Israel. He moves from, I don't know, let's say again, China, moves to Israel, or maybe a closer nation like, I don't know, who knows what would be a close nation, from Egypt, okay, to Israel. He circumcises himself and all the males in his household. That's a sign that he's now entered into the covenant, because that's the sign of the covenant, right? He now is, by doing that, showing, and it is kind of a self-sacrifice, right? It's not a pleasant thing to do, right? I mean, you really got to be dedicated to to want to do that to yourself, right? It really is kind of like a rite of passage or an entrance test into the nation of Israel to do that, right, to yourself, especially if you're when you're older, right? And then after he does that, now he's circumcised. That's his sign that he's entered permanently into the nation of Israel, and now now he can bring the Passover offering, and he becomes like a native born, like a native born with respect to bringing the Passover offering, meaning just like a native born Israelite can bring the Passover offering, so now the Ger, who has circumcised himself, can also bring the Passover offering, okay? But anyone who is uncircumcised may not eat of it, right? So just as we saw above, the slave, okay, has to circumcise himself right here in verse 44. The Ger, once he circumcises himself, okay, then he can bring the Passover offering. So anyone who's circumcised, that's the sign of entrance into the nation of Israel, okay? And that's the sign that that person, either against his will, in the case of a slave, or through his own will, wants to be a permanent part of the nation of Israel, and then he can bring the Passover offering, okay? But what's interesting here is he's still a Ger, okay? It says that it says here that he will then be like the native born of the land, okay? And native born of the land could mean two different things, but for now we're gonna go with the definition that it means a patrilineal descendant of Jacob, meaning someone who can trace their father's line back to Jacob, right? So the Ger becomes like the descendant, the patrilineal descendant of Jacob, but this is not a blanket statement, as some people, especially certain Karaites, like to say. The context here is with regards to the Passover offering. So just like the native born of the land, meaning a descendant of Jacob, is circumcised and can bring the Passover offering. So the Ger, once he circumcises, like the native born of the land, like the bloodline Israelite, he can also now bring the Passover sacrifice, right? He's joined himself. He has become an adjunct to the nation of Israel. Okay, and then it says here in verse 49, I've spoken about this verse a lot, Torah achad yi'el ezrach lager agar b'tochechem, and there shall be one Torah for the native-born Israelite and for the Ger who comes to live among you. Okay, and this is not a blanket statement. Okay, this doesn't mean that all of the Torah applies equally to the Ger as it does to the native-born Israelite. What this means is the word Torah means instruction or set of instructions. It almost always means that in the Torah, and it's referring to the instructions with regard to the bringing of the Passover sacrifice. Okay, and we know that because here it says in verse 43, this is the beginning of those laws, right? It goes from 43 through 51. Okay, at the beginning of that, in verse 43, it says, "V'yomer Yahweh el Moshe, and Yahweh said to Moshe and to Aaron, Zot chukat ha-Pasach." Okay, these are the laws of the Passover offering. Okay, chukah over here, down here, in verse 49 is the word Torah, but those words are basically used interchangeably. Okay, so this is the introduction of the laws for who can bring the Passover offering, right here in verse 43. And this is the summary sentence. And we know that often with a set of instructions, that's the way it works. There's an introductory sentence, then there's the laws, and then there's a summary sentence, okay? So when it says here Torah achad, it means one set of instructions, in parentheses, with regards to the Passover offering, shall there be for the native born and for the Ger who lives among you. Okay, so this is not a blanket statement, as some people, especially some Karaites, might have you think. That means that the entire Torah applies equally to the Ger as it does to the native-born Israelite, meaning there are no differences in the laws that apply to them. We'll see that there are actually, and even we could take it even further, right? The rabbis and some Karaites like to say that once a Ger becomes part of the nation Israel, there's no distinction, right, whatsoever. Okay, I don't think that's true. Okay, the Ger is definitely a part of the nation of Israel. Is an integral part of the nation of Israel. She is an integral part of the nation of Israel. But everyone in the nation of Israel knows their place, knows their status, knows their rank. Okay, everyone in the nation of Israel knows their name, rank, and serial number. Okay, that's the way it works. And there is a very definite hierarchy. And as I said earlier, for those of you who missed it earlier, even among the children of Jacob, there's a definite hierarchy, right? At the top of the hierarchy is Joseph and Judah. They are basically the two firstborns, right? And it's proven because Joseph is split into two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. So that's basically the double inheritance that the firstborn gets, right? One tribe, Joseph, splits into two tribes. So Joseph is at the top of the hierarchy. Yehuda is kind of, shall we say, stand-in or secondary firstborn son, because he's the firstborn of Leah after Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are knocked off their purchase for various reasons. Okay, so Yehuda is kind of also takes the place of the firstborn, and that's basically the reason that that later on the kingship is given to his descendant, to David. Okay, so there's a clear hierarchy. After that comes Benjamin. Or you could argue maybe the rest of the children of Leah, then maybe Benjamin, because Benjamin was the little baby, so maybe he doesn't come before the rest of the children of Leah. Then come the children of the concubines, and there's a clear hierarchy. Okay, we can see that in many different ways. We can even see that in the way that the different tribes are positioned around the tabernacle, the Mishkan, which we're going to get to. Wait, did we get to it already? I can't remember. Either we got to it in one of the past weeks, or we're going to get to it in one of the upcoming weeks, right? We see that the concubines get, the sons of the concubines, the tribes that come from the sons of the concubines, get lesser positions around the tabernacle. So there's a clear hierarchy, and that's just the way it is. Okay, that's just the way it is. Okay, it doesn't mean that as a human being, one person is better or worse than the other person. But like in an army, some people are lieutenant, some people are colonel, some people are 1-star general, some people are 5-star general. That's the way the army works, right? If everyone had the same rank, then the army's not going to work very well and not going to get very far. And Israel is often very good. Deuteronomy 23:15, slaves who have escaped to you from their owners shall not be given back to them. Exactly. Okay. Karaites do not acknowledge or celebrate the Pentecost. Correct? No, incorrect. In fact, the Pentecost, which means penta means 5 or 50, and cost means counting. It means counting to 50. And in Hebrew, the word for that, or the holiday, is Shavuoth. And actually, Karaites celebrate that starting tonight at sundown until tomorrow night after sundown. So we do celebrate it. We don't celebrate it in the same way the Christians do. In fact, I'm not even sure what the heck the Christians do on the Pentecost. But the Pentecost is the holiday of Shavuot, and it starts tonight at sundown for 24 hours, or for a little 25 hours. Okay, so yeah, so there we go. Where was I? What was I just talking about? Talking about Exodus. I forgot exactly what I was saying, but that's okay. Okay, all right. Any questions? Any comments so far? Anybody? I could have had a packing slave. That would have been nice. Packing, referring, by the way, to Nana McNana is one of my friends from the skydiver community, so she's talking about packing parachutes. Okay.
Hey, Malik, Harry's got a question for you.
So
yes.
You might explain for the record, how Karaites actually keep Shavuot that's different than the rabbinic celebration of the 10 Commandments and all that.
I could do that.
Is that okay, thank you.
Yeah, I could do that. So very briefly, the rabbis have given the meaning. They've made a meaning of Shavuot without going into all the details. They call it Chag Matan Torah, the festival of the giving of the Torah, because they claim, and there's no actual proof of this in the Torah. There is, I see where they get their indication from, but it's far from conclusive. And even if it were conclusive, what that they want to say that basically that the holiday of Shavuot falls more or less on the day that the Israelites were given the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. So they call it Chag Matan Torah, the festival of the giving of the Torah. And the way they celebrate it is basically the way any Chag, any holiday is celebrated, which means you're not allowed to do melacha, you're not allowed to do unnecessary or menial or unpleasant labor, right? You're not allowed to do any work. You're supposed to rest on that day and ostensibly have a nice festive meal and all of this kind of stuff. And on top of it, what the rabbinites do is they study Torah, and it's traditional to study Torah, although far from everybody does this, but the tradition is to study Torah all night long. So, for instance, Rabbinical Shavuot started on Thursday night at sunset. And if you really wanted to do it the right way, you would stay up all night long. When I was in yeshiva back in Jerusalem, we would stay up all night long, and rabbis would come in all night and give Torah lectures. And there would be a lot of coffee and a lot of cake to keep people awake. And then right before sunset, we'd all walk over to the Western Wall, to the Kotel, and then we'd pray the morning prayers over at the Kotel, which was kind of nice and really kind of actually annoying. It's not so much fun to walk about 2 miles at like 4 o'clock in the morning when you're exhausted and pumped up on coffee and cake, but it was nice, I guess. When I was very young, it was nice. At any rate, that's what the rabbis do with the holiday. That has nothing to do with what the holiday is in the Torah. The holiday in the Torah is a festival of the wheat harvest. Okay, the barley harvest starts at around Passover time. Right around Passover time, we start counting these 49 days, and then the 50th day after the beginning of the count there's a barley offering that's brought. It's called the wave sheaf offering, or the Omer offering, that's brought around Passover time, and that represents the first fruits of the barley harvest. And the idea of first fruits is when you start getting your crops in, then the first thing you do is you give a present to God, right? You don't take for yourself first. You thank God for the blessing He's given you in giving you these crops. And so you symbolically give some to God. That's the idea of the first fruits, okay? The bikurim. And so Passover is associated with the first fruits of the barley harvest. And then 50 days later, or shall we say 49 days later, after the actual bringing of the first fruits offering, the day after the Shabbat. So then 49 days later is the bringing of the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and that's what the festival of Shavuot or Pentecost celebrates. It's an agricultural festival. It has nothing to do with the giving of the Torah. It's not even clear that it falls on the day in which the Torah was given, and I won't get into it right now, but you see there's a lot of problems in that story. Yes, Ariella or Ben, you guys want to say something?
I actually have a question there. You just brought something up that I've never thought before. We go out and we look for the Aviv at the start. Why don't we go out and look for the wheat at the end?
It's a good question, but I think the reason is that it's assumed that once the barley is ready to be brought in the Omer offering, right? So that's the barley is ripe. Then 50 days later, the wheat for sure is going to be ripe, because there's a certain set lag time between the ripeness of the barley and the ripeness of the wheat. So it's not necessary to actually go out and look for it. The only thing that needs to be set is that very first harvest, which is the earliest harvest, which is the barley harvest, and then everything is just going to follow along naturally. So 50 days later, I know from my experience in living in Israel that 50 days after Passover, or after the barley becomes ripe, for sure the wheat is already going to be ripe, right? You'll actually just see eventually the barley is just going to dry out, and then the wheat, you're going to see a lot of wheat around the hills of Israel, and then they're going to kind of dry out. And I've never ever seen it, 50 days later, and the wheat is not ready to go. So I guess it's just assumed that it's actually 49 days after the actual Omer offering. It's 50 days from the Shabbat. So that 49 days later, I've never seen a case where the wheat is not ripe and ready to be brought, and an offering is ready to be brought. Okay, but if we look in in Leviticus chapter 23, you can see it very quickly. So here it is. This is Leviticus chapter 23, verse 15. Usafatim lechem mimacharat Shabbat, and you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Shabbat, which we understand as an actual Shabbat, Saturday. From the day of your bringing the wave sheaf offering, and this is the barley first fruits offering. Sheva Shabbatot, 7 Sabbaths. Tmimot tiana, there shall be 7 complete Sabbaths. Okay. Ad mimacharat Shabbat Shvi'it, until the day after the 7th Shabbat. Tisperu chamishim yom, you will have counted 50 days. Okay, so 40. So from that Shabbat, you count 7 Shabbats. That's 49 days. The following day is the 50th day. Pentecost, Penta, 50, cost, counting. Okay, Tisperu chamishim yom, you will have counted 50 days, or you will count 50 days. Mikraftem mincha chadasha Yahweh, and you will then bring a new grain offering to Yahweh. Okay, and what is this new grain offering you're going to bring on Shavuot, on the Pentecost? Okay. Moshavotechem taviu lechem tenufa. From your habitations, you shall bring a wave, or they call it elevation, offering of bread. Shtaim shnei esurim solet tiena. Okay, so 2 loaves of bread for a wave offering, from 2/10 of a measure of solet is fine flour. Tiena chametz tefena bikurim le-Yahweh. Okay, and you shall it shall be chametz, right? It shall be leavened bread this time, unlike with the Omer offering, which was just a sheaf, which is basically a bundle of grains or a bundle of stalks. Tefena bikurim le-Yahweh. Okay, it shall be, so basically you're bringing 2 loaves of as a grain offering, and the implication doesn't say it explicitly here, is wheat, and this is going to be bikurim le-Yahweh as a first fruit offering to Yahweh. Okay. And then it goes on to speak about what animal sacrifices have to be brought with that. Okay. Let me just see if there's anything else. And this is besides bringing these 2 wheat loaves on Shavuot, this is the only other thing that it says. And on this very day you shall declare a holy convocation, meaning it's a holiday. You shall not do any menial labor or any work. It is an eternal law throughout all your habitations and for all your generations. Okay? So that is Shavuot, right? That's what Shavuot is. Nothing about the giving of the Torah. It's a holiday. It's also one of the Shalosh Regalim. It's one of the 3 holidays in which the Israelites are commanded to come up to the tent of meeting, which eventually was Jerusalem, right? So commanded to come up to Jerusalem on Passover, on Shavuot, and on Sukkot, right? Which are basically the 3 agricultural holidays. So the beginning of the barley harvest, the beginning of the wheat harvest, and the gathering of all the fruits. That's Sukkot, right? On these agricultural festivals, all the males of Israel are commanded to come up to Jerusalem and celebrate with Yahweh, right? So that's Shavuot. Okay, so you're not supposed to do any work on that holiday, and you're supposed to bring or 2 loaves of bread. I don't think each person brings 2 loaves of bread. The Kohen brings 2 loaves of bread, which are waved before Yahweh, which symbolizes the beginning of the wheat harvest, right? It's like the kickoff. It's a celebration for the kickoff of the wheat harvest, right? Which was obviously a major harvest, probably the major harvest in Israel. Okay, so that's what Shavuot is all about. Karaites traditionally celebrate Shavuot on Sundays, and the men would prepare goose to be eaten. This was thought to help bring peace between the husband and wives. Okay. I don't know how a goose is going to bring peace between husband and wife. Maybe because the wife always gets the husband's goose. I don't know, something like that. I don't know. I have to figure that one out. All right. So, okay. Right. So that's a Chag Shavuot. Okay. And with that being said, I'm going to take a very, very quick break. I have to get the charger, so let's just take a break for just a couple of minutes. I won't even put on music, and we will be right back. Yes,
Melech, just very quickly, we're going to have to go. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to go again for a short time.
Sure.
Yeah. But as always, thank you very much. We've enjoyed it, and look forward to the next one.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Shavuot Tov.
Shavuot Tov.
All right. Okay, for everyone else, just give me about 3 minutes, and I'll be right back. Okay. We're back. Any questions, any comments so far? Anybody? No? Yes? All right, so let's go on. So we're going to go back to talking about the Ger. So that's Exodus 12. So let's look for a second at Exodus 18. So again, this is okay. This is still not working. So we can skip over that one anyway. Okay, so here's important. Exodus 20. Show how, sweetie. Don't do that, please. Okay, so let's go now to Exodus 20. Oh, Maria Nana Maknana, I love you too. Okay, so Exodus 20. This is the 10 Commandments. Hello. What's going on here? Okay, Exodus 20. And so here we have the first indication. Where'd we go? Right. So here we have the first indication of, so in Exodus 12, really for the first time, we saw that the ger, we saw a law about the ger within, sweetheart, you can't do that. We found this little kitten that we're taking care of. Okay. We found that the ger in Exodus 12 can bring the Passover offering, right? So that's our first law with regards to the ger in the Torah, okay? Well, here's our second law. So that first law gives an indication that the ger is a full-fledged part of the nation of Israel. Once the ger is circumcised, then he can bring the Passover offering just as a native-born Israelite can do, okay? Now we see in Exodus 20, which is the 10 Commandments, we see the, show him, sweetie. Okay, the commandment for Shabbat, okay, we're going to talk about Shabbat here, okay? Oh, sweetheart, come, baby. Okay, and we'll start in Exodus 20, verse 8. Zachoret Yom HaShabbat l'kadsho. Okay, remember the Shabbat day to keep it holy. Sheshit yamim tavod v'asita kol melachtecha. For 6 days you may work and do all of your work, all of your necessary work. Okay. Yom HaShavi'i Shabbat liYahweh Elohecha. But the 7th day is a Shabbat, is a day of rest, a day of ceasing to Yahweh your God. Okay? Lo ta'aseh kol melacha. You shall not do any work. And then we get a specific list of, and there's other lists elsewhere in the Torah, but here we get a specific list of the categories. Oh, sweetheart. The categories of people that are not supposed to do work. Okay, you, ata bincha bitecha, you, your son, your daughter, avdecha, your slave, amatecha, so that's your male slave, amatecha is your female slave, bemtecha, your animals, v'gercha shebesharecha, and the ger, okay, the sojourner, the person the stranger who has become a part of your people, asher b'sharecha, who lives in your gates. Okay, so we see here that all of besides the person himself, all of the types of people or the categories of people that are listed here, or the positions of people that are listed here, these are people who could easily be taken advantage of, and they're given special protection by the Torah. Okay, your son, your daughter. Okay, so you could let's say you own a factory, right? You could easily make your son or your daughter work on the Shabbat. Your manservant and your maidservant, right? Your male slave and your female slave. You can easily make them work in your factory on the Shabbat or your warehouse on the Shabbat, right? Your animals, you can put them to work on the Shabbat. And the ger, okay, the person who is not, of a blood descendant of Jacob, you could easily take advantage of him. So these are all protected classes within Israel. Okay, these are people who even though they might be taken advantage of, the Torah tells us explicitly that they are not permitted to work. You are not allowed to force them to work on, or to even allow them to work on the Shabbat. They also get the day of rest. Okay, your son, your daughter, your male slave, your female slave, your animals, and the sojourner or the stranger that has come to join your nation. Or literally it says the stranger that is in your gates, which means basically living in your cities or living among you. Okay. So that's the first indication, and we'll see many more such indications in the Torah that the Ger is a protected class. Okay, the Ger, because he comes from a different nation, because he's not of your blood line, right? He's not related to you by blood. He could easily be taken advantage of, and also because he doesn't have an inheritance in the land, he doesn't get a share in the land of Israel. He doesn't own land within the land of Israel, so he could easily be taken advantage of. And therefore, the Torah tells us that on Shabbat, that even the Ger has the right and the obligation to rest, just like the rest of the nation of Israel. You cannot take advantage of the Ger and put him to work in your factory or in your fields or wherever on Shabbat. Okay? All right, let's move on. And then we have Exodus 22:21. We'll pick it up over here. Exodus 22. Shoham, what are you looking for, sweetheart? Shoham, are you hungry? Are you hungry? Okay. So Exodus 22, this is a bunch of different laws. Okay. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they usually call this the Holiness Code. So 22:21. And so it's just a bunch of different laws. And here we have in verse 21, or starting in verse 20, so this is Exodus chapter 22, verse 20. Okay, you shall not oppress a ger, a stranger, okay? And or you shall not wrong or oppress a stranger, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt, okay? And then it goes on to speak about kol amana v'yatom lo te'anun. You shall not oppress the widow or the orphan. Again, solidifying the idea that the ger is one of these protected classes, right? The widow and the orphan could easily be taken advantage of, right? A wife that doesn't have a husband or a child that doesn't have parents, they could easily be taken advantage of in any society, especially in ancient societies or in traditional societies where family is so important, right? And so you're not allowed to oppress them, and you're also not allowed to mistreat or oppress the ger, the stranger. Okay, so we see again that the ger is a protected class. Okay, we see the ger can become permanently part of the nation of Israel by circumcising. And is it a sin for me to work tomorrow? It's not a sin, because the Shavuoth is the Torah is a covenant between God and Israel, right? So since you're not Jewish, you don't have to follow it. However, I know that there are many people who decide of their own will that they want to celebrate the holidays along with Israel. And if you choose to do that, then you may choose to take a day off tomorrow, to not work tomorrow. But no, it is not a sin, because you're not, as a non-Israelite, you're not under that part of the covenant between, you would like to, then do it. Then you should do it. Then you should definitely do it. Okay, we're going to see verses later about how all of the nations will celebrate, for instance, Sukkot with the nation of Israel. If we get to it, maybe we'll continue also next week, because it's already starting to get a little bit late. Okay. So then we have again in Exodus 23, same kind of phrase. So Exodus 23:9. So again, this is a continuation of what's called the Holiness Code. and we get to verse 9, and it says, same kind of statement. You shall not oppress the ger, okay, the foreigner, okay, the person who has come from a distant land to live among you permanently, because you know the how would you say, translate here is feelings. You know the soul, the essence of the ger. Because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Okay, so again, it just solidifies this idea that the ger is not to be oppressed, is not to be taken advantage of. Right, the ger gets to rest on the Shabbat, and the ger cannot be taken advantage of or oppressed. All right. Okay, that's 23. Uh, 23:12. So this is again a restatement of the Shabbat. So for 6 days you shall do your tasks. And on the 7th day you shall cease, you shall rest. In order that your ox, the chamorcha, and your donkey should rest. And in order that the son of your maidservant and the ger should be able to refresh themselves. Okay, should be refreshed. Okay, so we see here once again a list of oppressed or potentially oppressed categories of, we can't say people because it includes animals here, of creatures. I don't know if that works either, but potentially oppressed classes, right? And among them are the animals, the son of your maidservant. Okay, so if you have a maidservant, right, and a maidservant could mean a concubine, right, and the son of the concubine could easily be considered kind of like a almost like an adopted son, or like not, like what was it, Cinderella or something like that, right? Like not a full-fledged son, so it could easily be taken advantage of or made to do all the menial work, right? So the son of your concubine or the son of your maidservant also must rest, and also the ger, right? So we have a slightly similar but slightly different list than we saw in Exodus 20. But again, it solidifies this idea that the ger is a protected class and is allowed to, or is must rest on the Shabbat. You are not to allow the ger to work on the Shabbat. Okay, he gets his day of rest as well. She gets their day of rest. Okay. Alrighty. Yeah, I understand. I meant I would like to celebrate with the Jews and not work. I got that, Mariana Mikdana. Yes, I think you should do it then. I think you should do it. I think you should take tomorrow off, and you should celebrate with the Jews. If that is what is in your heart to do, you should do it. And then you become not like a ger, but you become like a what I like to call a nilwe, which I think in the modern parlance, as I mentioned earlier, would be like a supporter or an ally of the people of Israel, of the Torah of Israel, of the God of Israel. So I think it's a great idea. If that is what is in your heart to do, I think you should do it. Okay, so this cat is starting to get a little bit active. Are you hungry, sweetheart? Are you hungry? By the way, if you ever have any questions about ferrets, Mariana Mikdana is actually probably one of the world's leading ferret experts. I kid you not. She has like an immense amount of experience with ferrets. So if you need any advice about ferrets, contact me, and with her permission, I'll put you in contact with her. Okay, excuse me for 1 second. I'm just going to go feed the cat. It'll just take 1 second. So I'll be right back. Come here, Shoham. Come, sweetheart. Come here. Come here. Come here, little baby. Come on. Come on. Come on, Shoham. Shoham. Come on, sweetheart. Come here. Are you hungry? Come. There you go, baby. There you go. Sufi. Okay. Okay, so we're back. Where were we? Okay. Okay, Leviticus 16:29. Let's take a look at that for a second. So Leviticus 16 has to do actually with Yom Kippurim. Where was it? It was Leviticus 16:29. Let me do it this way. Let me see if this is working again. Probably not. Right. So this is speaking about the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippurim, which takes place on the 10th day of the 7th month. And we see here, I'll just go through it very briefly, okay? That again, I'll just read the English here, okay? On the 10th day of the 7th month, you must deny yourselves and not do any work, whether native born or foreigner. Oh boy, you're getting cat food all over me. Whether native born or foreigner residing among you, okay? So this is basically just saying, again, if we look at it in the Hebrew, let's see if the Hebrew's up and working right now. Mm-hmm. No, it's lacking strange. So Leviticus 16:29. So so this is now saying that on Yom Kippurim, on the 10th day of the 7th month, or actually starting the 9th in the evening, then both the native born, what's with it? Come here. Okay. Both the native born and the ger are to fast, or are to. It literally says afflict yourselves, which is understood as fast. I won't get into why, but I think that is the correct understanding. And not do any work. Okay, so it's like the Shabbat. Okay, just like on the Shabbat, the ger is, well, I guess it's more like the regulations for the Passover offering, right? That if the ger and if the Ezrach and the ger are circumcised, then they may bring the Passover offering. So here, the Ezrach and the ger are required also to fast and to not do any work on Yom Kippurim. So this is basically including the ger in the restrictions on Yom Kippurim, that the ger also has to do this fasting for the holiday, which is essentially a holiday for the cleansing of the Mishkan, or of the Mikdash, of the holy area, okay, of the tabernacle. Okay, we're going to move on past that one. Leviticus 17. So Leviticus 17:8. So again, this is the laws of the sacrifice, okay? And let me just look at it here. So I guess the English is working here. Let's see, we can bring it up in, oops. In the English, it's easier to get context when you see the whole thing on the screen in the English. So Leviticus 17:8, NIV. Okay, so this has to deal with the sacrifices. And here, say to them, any Israelite or any foreigner residing among them who offers a burnt offering or sacrifice and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to sacrifice it to Yahweh must be cut off from the people of Israel. So again, including the ger in this requirement that sacrifices must only be brought to that one place, right? The place that God chooses. Okay. And then again in 17:10, anyone who eats the blood, okay, so no one in Israel, including the Gerim, are allowed to eat the blood of the sacrifice. Okay, the blood is thrown at the base of the altar or sprinkled against the altar. Okay, and so on and so forth in Leviticus 17. I think we can skip past a lot of this. Shoham, what are you doing, sweetheart? Do you have to use the bathroom? Shoham. What, baby? You have to use the bathroom? All right, let me let the cat use the bathroom now. We got a whole bunch of cat stuff going on. Come here, baby. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Be right back. What, sweetheart? Oh. No? Okay, come on. Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead through a lot of this. Okay, Leviticus 18. Let's just look at Leviticus 18 for a second. So that is Leviticus, that's Leviticus 18:26. So Leviticus 18 is all kinds of vices, okay, that Israel is to stay away from, right? So just to put it in context, the beginning of Leviticus 18, the Lord said to Yahweh, said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, I am Yahweh, your God. You must not do as they did in Egypt, where you used to live, and you must not do as they do in the land of Canaan, where I'm bringing you to, okay? And then we have a whole bunch of things which involve a lot of forbidden sexual activities, such as incest and other stuff like sacrificing to Molech, which is probably child sacrifice, is child sacrifice. And then we get down to Leviticus 18:26. And it says, but you must keep my decrees and my laws. The native born and the foreigners residing among you must not do any of these detestable things. And the foreigners is, of course, the Gerim, okay? So they translate as foreigners, but again, the idea of a foreigner when it comes to Israel is someone who has permanently become a part of Israel, someone who has moved from a foreign place or been taken from a foreign place and now has decided to permanently live in Israel himself for the rest of his life, him, herself for the rest of her life, and all of her descendants, okay? So since they are part of the nation of Israel, they are not to partake in any of these thingies, right? So we're talking about incest, we're talking about bestiality, you know, the usual stuff that you find on the internet if you are looking for such things. Okay, the native born and the foreigners residing among you, blah blah blah. Okay, so that's pretty clear. Okay. So again, we've seen two types of law. Let me just sum up here. We've seen two types of statements regarding the ger. Okay, the three types of statements. Okay, the first type could be called the inclusive statement, right? The ger is allowed to do the ger, once he's circumcised, okay, or the ger is allowed to do the same things that the native-born Israelite, the Ezrach, can do, such as bring the Passover offering, okay, such as he must fast and not to work on Yom Kippurim, such as he has to bring sacrifices only to the tent of meeting. Okay, that's the first kind of statement we've seen. Okay, the second kind of statement we've seen is or laws that we've seen are laws that protect the ger. The ger is, although she is part of the nation of Israel, I'll just say he is could easily be taken advantage of, right? And therefore is a protected class. So on the Shabbat, you're not allowed to force the ger to work, okay? You're not allowed to oppress or take advantage of the ger. We saw that in Exodus 22 and 23, right? And now we're going to see another one in Leviticus 19. So Leviticus 19. Oh, and then the third kind of statement is basically, the ger because you were gerim. You were gerim in the land that was not yours, in the land of Egypt. Okay, so Leviticus 19, verse 10. So here again is kind of a bunch of laws, shall we say? And here we have something that's usually called pe'ah and leket, okay? Verse 9, Leviticus 19:9, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field, that's pe'ah, or gather the gleanings of your harvest, that's leket. Do not go over your vineyard a second time, or pick up the grapes that have fallen and leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am Yahweh your God. And let's take a look at that in Hebrew. That's Leviticus 19:9. Oh, Shoham, sweetheart. Sweetheart. Leviticus 19:9. And what it says here, okay? When you cut down, or when you reap the harvest of your land, lo tichale pe'at sadcha, do not finish off the corners of your field. Okay, here they translate, you should not reap all the way to the edges of your field, but literally do not finish off the corners of your field. Liktzor, to reap. Okay, do not reap all the way to the corners of your field. And that which is left over after you harvest, you shall not go back and gather again. That's called the gleanings. Okay, so the gleanings would be like, oh, I don't know, I'm harvesting oranges and I go through the orange orchard once and I haven't gotten all the oranges. There are still a couple of oranges left on the trees. I don't go back and take every last orange. I leave that, as we'll see in the next verse. Okay, I leave that for the poor and for the stranger, for the ger. Okay, so the corners of your field. So when you're cutting down, when you're reaping the harvest of your land, okay, you leave the corners of the field. Okay, whatever your field is, you leave corners. It doesn't say how much, but whatever you decide to do, the rabbis give a number to it later on. But that's almost kind of silly in my opinion. But you leave the corners of your field, and that's for the poor and for the gerim, for the strangers. Okay, for the ger. Okay, and also when you go harvest your fruits or whatever you pick the first time, you don't go back and you don't pick every last fruit off the tree. Or whatever it is, grain off the field, you leave whatever you didn't get the first time. You leave those little bits left, the gleanings. You leave that again for the poor person and the ger. Okay, and then it says your vineyard you shall not te'olel. Te'olel is here they translate it as pick bare. But yeah, it basically means reap to the end. V'peret karmecha lo tilaket, and that which falls off of your vines, you shall not go back and gather. So it's the same idea. So all of these things, okay, the corners of your field, the leftover from your harvest, and the leftover from your grapes and that which falls onto the floor when you're harvesting your grapes, you shall not go back and take them. Le'ani u'leger ta'zovotam ani Yahweh Elohechem. Okay, for the poor person and for the ger, you shall leave them. I am Yahweh your God. So again, that's just like on Shabbat, the ger cannot work. So we see again the ger. This is a statement of the ger being a protected class. Okay, it's understood that the ger is going to be disadvantaged because they don't have a land inheritance. They don't have the family connections that someone who's a native-born Israelite would have, and so therefore they have special protections built in. Okay, you're not allowed to oppress them. You're not allowed to take advantage of them. You're not allowed to force them to work on the Shabbat, and you have to leave food. You have to leave after you go through and harvest your fields. Whatever's left over, you have to leave it for the poor and for the ger. Okay, so that they can always at least have enough to eat. Okay. All right. Any questions, any comments so far before we go on? Anybody? All right. If you have, just chime in. Okay. So that's that. Leviticus 19:33. Let's take a look at that very briefly. And that's again a statement. Okay. So this is again that general kind of statement, important but general kind of statement about the ger. Okay, that the ger should not be oppressed. If a ger lives among you, okay, or sojourns among you, or resides among you in your land, lo tonu oto. Okay, do not take advantage of him. Do not do wrong to him. Okay. Okay, like a native born among you shall be to you for you the ger, Hagar itchem, who lives among you or lives with you. V'ahavtalo kamocha, and you shall love him like yourself. Ki gerim aitem be'eretz Mitzrayim, because you were gerim, you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Ani Yahweh Elohechem, I am Yahweh your God. Okay, so again we see that the ger is to be treated like an Ezrach. That doesn't mean that the ger has to follow exactly all the same laws as the Ezrach. We will see examples where that is where it's not the case that the ger and the Ezrach follow exactly the same law. But just as you love your fellow native born or your fellow blood related Israelite, so you shall love the ger, and he shall be like a native born among you. Okay. In other words, you treat him almost like an adopted brother or an adopted sister. That's basically what it's saying. Okay. Okay. So that's Leviticus 19. Let's open this up. Okay, Leviticus 20. Do we want to look at that for a second, maybe? Okay, so don't sacrifice the Molech. That includes the Israelite and the ger. So just as the Israelite and the ger were required to bring all offerings to the tent of meeting. So again, right? Basically, if you're a ger, then you have to more or less act like an Israelite, right? You're expected to be held to the same standard as an Israelite, and you're treated like an adopted brother, adopted sister, okay, or an adopted son, adopted daughter. Okay. Leviticus 22:18. Just want to see if there's anything in these verses that I specifically want to point out. So again, it mentions the Israelite and the ger, and this is regarding to not bringing blemished or not bringing unacceptable offerings, right, Sean? Sweetheart. Oh my God, are you a sweetie? This little cat is so sweet. So, okay, I don't have anything explicit to say there. 23:22. I'd like to get to some of the stuff in the Tanach regarding Gerim. So let me just go through these verses quickly and see if there's anything I want to say about any of them. So this is the same thing we saw before. This is a reiteration of what we saw in Leviticus, was it 19, I think? Yeah. And so this is the reiteration of the pe'ah and the leket. Okay, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and for the foreigner residing among you. I am Yahweh, your God. Right. So it's a reiteration of what we saw in Leviticus 19:10. Is it 19:10? Yes. In other words, leaving the corner of your field and leaving the gleanings for the poor and for the ger. Leviticus 24:16. So this is the blasphemer. So this is someone who cursed the explicit name of God. I won't say the name, okay, but cursed. They call it blaspheme here. And what's interesting is the person who did it is a ger. Okay, the father is an Egyptian father, and the mother is an Israelite mother. In the Tanach, in the Torah, we go by the father, not by the mother. The rabbis, of course, changed it later on. So the rabbis say, I'm sure most of you know, but for those of you who don't, the rabbis say that if your mother was Jewish, you're Jewish. And that has no basis in the Tanakh. In the Tanakh, if your father was Jewish or Israelite, then you are Israelite. So here we have the son of an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father, and points us out explicitly to say that this was not an Ezrach, this was not a native-born Israelite. This is basically a ger, right? This is the mother is an Israelite, but the father, and that's where the child gets his or her status from, it was an Egyptian. So this is a ger. And that person who curses using the explicit name of God or curses the explicit name of God is put to death, is stoned to death. And then we have the law here, whether foreigner or native born, when they blaspheme the name, they are to be put to death. Okay, so I guess the reason that it's saying explicitly foreigner or native born, well, we've seen it in most cases, like we saw before, that if you're going to bring a sacrifice, whether you're foreigner or native born, you bring it to the tent of meeting. Okay, on Yom Kippurim, whether you're foreigner or native born, you have to fast and you have to refrain from work. Okay, whether you're foreigner or native born, what was the other ones? You are not to sacrifice your child to Molech, right? So all of these extreme things, it seems to mention explicitly foreigner or native born, to point out that yes, you might think maybe it doesn't apply to the ger, because the ger is, we give him a pass because he's not born Israelite, but it's showing again and again that especially for the extreme things, for the very, very important things such as idol worship or proper bringing of sacrifices to the place of God, then explicitly the ger is mentioned, right? It's important that the ger be following, be part of the nation of Israel and not do anything that's egregiously different from what's expected of the nation of Israel. Okay, and we see this again here in Leviticus 24. Okay, Leviticus 24:22. So here, this is an interesting one. I want to look at this one in the Hebrew. So this is Leviticus 24:22. Let me again just see if by some chance the Hebrew's up and working again. Here, it's easy to use the site. Leviticus. Okay. Hebrew. Okay, it looks to be. So Leviticus 24. Okay. Let's start here in verse 17. Anyone who slays another person, another human being, must be put to death. Okay, if you kill, you are killed. If you spill blood, your blood is spilled. Of course, it's talking about without any cause in doing so, right? Umakeh nefesh, or unjustified murder, right? Umakeh, or murder. Umakeh nefesh behema yishalmenu nefesh tachat nefesh, and anyone who kills an animal shall pay for it, literally a soul for a soul, or an individual for an individual. So basically, it's saying if you kill an animal, then you have to make monetary restitution based on the value of the animal. Verse 19. V'ish ki yiten mum ba'amito kasher asa chen ya'aseh lo. And anyone who injures, who makes a permanent injury among his fellow Israelite, kasher asa, as he did, chen ya'aseh lo. So these verses are the eye for an eye, right? So it says here, so shall it be done to him, but that's not really what it says in my very strong opinion. And I've written an article about this. In fact, I can point, well, I won't point to the article. Well, maybe I will for 1 second. 1 second. So, geez, what is going on here? I don't understand. The internet's working very strange today. Okay. So, v'ish ke iten mum ba'amito. So anyone who permanently injures, in other words, who leaves a permanent mark on his fellow Israelite, kasher asa, as he did, so should it be done to him. Okay, I don't think this really means it is to be done to him. I think, and I've written an article on it again. Let me see if it's coming up now. Hello. Oh, there we go. Here for a second. An eye for an eye. So if you're interested in my take on whether an eye for an eye is meant to be taken literally, which I don't think it is, then you could check out this article here. I'll post it in the comments. The only time it's meant to be taken literally is in the case of murder. If you murder someone, then you are put to death. Okay. So as you do to him, so should it be done to you. And I'm not going to get into why I think that's what it's saying right now, but you can read the article. Shever tachat shever, so a break for a break, a broken bone for a broken bone. Ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye. Shein tachat shein, a tooth for a tooth. Kasher yiten mum, ba'adam ken yinaten bo. As he makes an injury in his fellow man or in another person, so should it be made in him. Okay? It should, but it's not. He can pay his way out of it. Verse 21, and anyone who kills an animal shall pay for it, and anyone who kills a person shall be put to death. Okay? And then we have mishpat echad yeh lachem kager ke'ezrach yeh ki ani Yahweh Elohechem. There should be one judgment for you, kager ke'ezrach. Just as it is for the ger, so it shall be for the native-born Israelite. Okay, ki ani Yahweh Elohechem, because I am Yahweh, your God. So what is this speaking about? Okay, some people again take this as a blanket statement to say that the ger and the ezrach, the convert and the native-born Israelite, are exactly the same with no distinction between each other whatsoever. That's not what this is saying here. What this is saying is that with regard to cases of injury or cases of murder, then the ger and the ezrach have to follow the same set of judgments. Okay, so if a ger, let's say, breaks, punches out 5 teeth of another ger or an ezrach, whatever, whether it's a ger or ezrach, if one injures the other, it doesn't matter whether the injuring party or the injured party is a ger or an ezrach. The judgment is the same. There's no distinction between the way a ger is treated and the way that an ezrach is treated with regards to damages for injuries, right? So what this is saying is not, and so many people misunderstand this verse, and certain Karaites misunderstand this verse as a blanket statement to say that mishpat echad, meaning there is one judgment, there's one Torah, there's no distinction whatsoever between the ger and the ezrach. That is not what this verse is saying. What this verse is saying is that with regards to the laws of injury, okay, you're not. It doesn't matter whether you're a ger or an ezrach. You're to be treated the same, okay. And really, what this is saying is, if I knock out the teeth of a ger, I have to pay the same amount, or I have to have the same punishment as I would as if it were a native-born Israelite. Okay, you can't say that because this is a ger, that's like a second-class citizen. He doesn't have the same rights. So I don't have to make restitution for the fact that I punched his teeth out or something like that. No, whether it's a ger or whether it's an ezrach, whether it's a convert, a stranger, or whether it's a native-born bloodline, your flesh and blood Israelite, then it doesn't matter. The judgment is the same in either case. You cannot use as an excuse, he's only a ger, and therefore even though I punched out his teeth, I don't have to pay him. I don't have to pay him, $10,000 for dental work and pain and suffering and all of this kind of stuff, right? That's not allowed. It doesn't matter if he's a ger. You still have the same judgment against you as if it were an ezrach. And likewise, if the ger were the attacking party, then he also still has the same responsibility to the other person, whether the person he attacked was a ger or an ezrach. Okay, and of course, the judges are going to judge these cases, and the implication here is that it's unjustified, right? It's not, if it's in self-defense, whatever. This is where the judges come in. They hear the specifics of the individual cases, and they make the appropriate decisions. But what this is saying is that it's not an excuse to say, that's just a ger. He's not a real Israelite. He's just some I don't know, some Edomite that came to live with us, and therefore, I punched out his teeth. I got into a bar fight with him, and I punched out his teeth, but he's just a ger. I shouldn't have to pay for it. He's not a real Israelite. No, this verse is saying that he's to be treated in this respect just like a real Israelite, and you have to make the same restitution to him as you would whether it's an Israelite or whether it's a ger. That's what this means. But it's not a blanket statement that there's no distinction whatsoever between the ger and the ezrach. In fact, I would claim that this verse proves there is a distinction between the ger and the ezrach, because otherwise this verse would not even be necessary. You wouldn't have to say that it's the same judgment for a ger as it is for an ezrach, or it's the same judgment between a ger and the ezrach if there were no distinction between the two, right? These are two different statuses within Israel. One is a ger, one is someone who's joined the nation of Israel, one is an ezrach, one is a native-born Israelite, right? It's like in America, the difference between, let's say, someone who can trace their ancestry back to the Pilgrims who came on the Mayflower, and let's say a recent legal recent legal immigrant who emigrated from I don't know wherever 25 years ago. Okay, you can't say, hey, my ancestors came on the Mayflower, so I can punch this guy's teeth out and there are no consequences, or there are fewer consequences because I'm a real American and he's not. That's exactly what this verse is saying, is fighting against, or is making a statement against. But it's not saying that someone whose descendants, who is the descendants of someone who came on the Mayflower, is going to have the same status as someone who just came to the United States 25 years ago, right? Obviously, there's going to be a different, shall we say, the person whose descendants who's descended from the Pilgrims on the Mayflower are going to have a lot more roots in the country than an immigrant who came to the country, 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. That's just the fact of the matter. And so, de facto, they're going to have different statuses within the nation. One is going to be probably much more established, is maybe going to be a lot wealthier, is maybe going to have a lot more family connections in the country. That's just a fact of life, right? But nonetheless, the Mayflower descendant can't just go, say, hey, I just punched out this immigrant's teeth, and so he's just a lowly immigrant, so I don't really have to pay for it. That's what this verse is speaking out against. Okay. If April showers bring May flowers, what do May flowers bring? June bugs? I don't know. What do May flowers bring? Tell me. Okay. That's that. Okay. So that's Leviticus 24. Oh, hold on a second. Sufi, you're not. Sufi girl, no, you get your dinner soon. No. You don't get your dinner. No way. So much cat activity going on here. Okay, that goes away. Shoham, you already ate. There is a lot of cat activity going on in this house. Okay. So that's Leviticus 24. Leviticus 25. Let's take a look at very briefly. '25, 23. Okay, so this is interesting. So this is, I think we should summarize here the different types of, well, maybe I'll just do it orally. I won't write down an official list. So this falls into one of our categories, okay? 25, 23. So this is speaking about the Jubilee year. And on the Jubilee year, all land reverts to its original landowners. And Leviticus 25, 23 says, I'll read it in the English, and then maybe we'll look at it in the Hebrew. The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, and you reside in my land as foreigners and strangers. Throughout the land that you hold as a possession, you must provide for the redemption of the land. Okay, let's look at that in Leviticus 20, in the Hebrew, I mean. So Leviticus 25. Oh, I think this is working now, right? So to make a long story short, what happens is that every Israelite, every native-born Israelite, in other words, anyone who can trace their patrilineal line, their fathers, back to Jacob, gets what's called the land inheritance, an inheritance in the land, okay? Achuzat, or an achuzah ba'aretz, okay? Or nachala ba'aretz, okay? They get an inheritance in the land of Israel. The land is divided up by lot to all of the descendants, and then each person, and as the descendants multiply, each person's land inheritance gets smaller and smaller, but it's divided up among all of the descendants, right? Broken up by tribe, and then broken up by clan, etc. So, but every native-born Israelite has a land inheritance, has a parcel of land or a patch of land in Israel, or an area of land in the land of Israel that is theirs forever. It cannot be taken away from them. It's given to them when the Israelites, it was given to them when the Israelites entered the land. It was given to the tribes, and then the tribes divided it out among the various clans, the clans among the families among the individuals, and there was a lot of laws regarding this inheritance, such as the issue of the daughters of Tzalafchad that we saw a couple of weeks ago. Okay, so that we spoke about a couple of weeks ago. So what happens is, if an Israelite wants to sell his land, he really can't. Okay, what he can do is he can rent out his land to somebody else, whether it's another Israelite or whether to a non-Israelite. He can rent it out, okay, for up to 50 years until the Jubilee year comes. And I will get so far off track, but the Jubilee is related to the Pentecost, the Chag Shavuot, in the sense that it's the 50th year, just as the Pentecost is the 50th day, just as the Shabbats that we count from the bringing of the barley offering, the Omer offering, until Shavuot. There are 7 Shabbats, and then the 50th day is Shavuot. So there are 7 sets of 7 years of Shemitah years on which the land rests. And making 49 years, and the 50th year is another year of rest for the land. Plus, it's also the Jubilee year, in which all of the land freedom is proclaimed throughout the land. Okay, proclaim freedom throughout your land. I believe that's written on the Liberty Bell. Okay, and it comes from this chapter of Leviticus right here. Let's just find it for a second. You shall proclaim freedom in the land for all its inhabitants. Okay, that is exactly what's inscribed in English on the Liberty Bell, Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10. Okay, so at any rate, what happens is on this 50th year, on the Jubilee year, all of the land reverts to its original owners. Okay, so like we said, every native-born Israelite gets a land inheritance that's theirs. Okay, it's given to them by the very fact that they're a native-born Israelite, that they're a bloodline Israelite, and they can never sell it permanently. What they can do is rent it out for up to 50 years, and then on the Jubilee year, it goes back into their hands. That's one of the things that happens on the Jubilee year. And then we have here in Leviticus 25:23, and the land shall not be sold permanently or forever, because the land belongs to me. This is God speaking. This is Yahweh speaking. Because you are sojourners and settlers. How do they translate it here? Well, they translate gerim as strangers and sojourners. You are with me. Okay? So in other words, okay, verse 24, V'chol eretz achuzatchem gi'ula titnu la'aretz, and throughout all of the land of your holdings, of your land holdings, of your inheritance, your possession, gi'ula titnu la'aretz, you shall give a redemption for the land. In other words, the land is redeemed in the sense that in this 50th Jubilee year, the land goes back to its original owners, right? The ones who were originally given that piece of land. And why is that? Okay. Why can the land not be forever? Sold forever? Ki lihad. It's because the land doesn't really belong to you. It belongs to me. Okay? Ki gerim v'toshavim atem imadi. But you are strangers and sojourners with me. Okay? So what God is saying is, don't think you own the place. All right? Talking about the land of Israel. Okay? You don't own the place. I own the place. It's my land, and I'm letting you live here with me in this land, literally, because God lives in the Mishkan. God lives in the Mikdash, in the sanctuary, in the tabernacle, in the temple. Okay, so I'm letting you live here among me, okay, or along with me, okay. But don't think the land is yours, okay. You're not going to sell it to other people permanently, okay. But because you yourselves are just strangers here, so you have no right to sell the land permanently. It's my land. You can't sell it to anyone else permanently. But what this is really saying is this is a protection for, in this case, native-born Israelites, that even if they get, let's say they become very poor and the only way they can support themselves is to sell off their land inheritance, okay, permanently, they're not allowed to do it. Every Israelite retains a piece of land within the land of Israel. This is a protection for native-born Israelites. It's not a protection for Gerim, ironically, even though it mentions that the Israelites are the Gerim. This is meant, I guess, kind of figuratively, right? But Gerim do not have an inheritance in the land, and that's why they have other protections, such as they're not allowed to be forced to work on the Shabbat. They're not allowed to be oppressed. They're not allowed to be taken advantage of, okay? They get the same judgments as we saw in Leviticus chapter 23. If they're injured, then they get the same rights as a native-born Israelite, right? But one thing that a ger does not have, at least until the end of days, and we'll see this in the rest of the Tanach. I guess we won't get to it this week, but we'll get to it. I think I'll continue this topic next week. Is that the ger does not have an inheritance in the land. He doesn't have a parcel of land which is his by birthright. Okay, at least not until the end of days, as we shall see. All right. Wow. Oh, what do Mayflowers bring pilgrims? Oh, of course, I should have known that. I knew that joke, actually. Okay. Okay. So let's read this again. So this is speaking to the native-born Israelites. This is speaking not to the Gerim, but it's comparing the native-born Israelites to Gerim. The land shall not be sold for eternity, for permanently. Because the land belongs to me. But you are strangers and sojourners with me. Okay, you're in my world, Israelites. Okay, this is my land. Okay, and don't forget who you are and where you came from. Okay, you came from nowhere. Okay, you were told, your ancestor Abraham was told to leave his birthplace. Okay, and come to a land that he'd never been to before. Okay, he didn't have any kind of permanent connection or permanent possession in the land until, as we saw in Genesis chapter whatever it was, 15. No, I can't remember. In Genesis, when he bought the Marat Machpelah, until he bought the cave of Machpelah to bury Sarah. That was his first time he actually gained an akuzah, a landholding, a possession within the land of Israel, right? But then we know that eventually his descendants go down to Egypt, and they're strangers in a strange land. Or first Moses goes out to Midian. He's a stranger in a strange land. Or not first. Israelites go down to Egypt. They're strangers in a strange land. Moses even has to leave this strange land to go to a stranger land called Midian. He names his son Gershom, which means a stranger there, because he says he's a stranger in a strange land. Okay, and it's not until the end of the Tanach that the Israelites return to the land of Israel. And even when they do, God is saying, don't forget where you came from. Okay, don't forget where you came from. Right? It's like some person from the hood who makes it big as a rapper and then forgets all his little stupid hood friends when he becomes a millionaire, right? Don't forget where you came from, right? Don't forget your roots, okay? You were nothing, okay? You didn't have any inheritance in this land. You had to go down to Egypt where you were oppressed, okay? So don't oppress the Ger. You were enslaved and you were oppressed. Okay, Moses had to even run away from there. Finally, I took you out of there. And when you come into this land, okay, don't all of a sudden don't forget your roots. Don't forget how you were strangers, okay? And when you come into this land, that doesn't mean you own the place and therefore you can sell the land, okay? Or you can buy the land from another native Israelite and therefore dispossess him of his land inheritance. No, the land belongs to me. So remember, everyone has their portion in the land because it doesn't really belong to you. You have no right to buy it and sell it for permanently. Okay, you have to remember that it goes back to its possessors in the Jubilee year, and that's really what this law is all about. It's really a beautiful law. It basically prevents any Israelite from becoming so impoverished that they lose a possession of land. Every Israelite, no matter how poor they become, they could even be sold into slavery. Okay, up to 6 years. On the 7th year, they go free. Right? Speaks about this in Exodus. Is it 21 or 22? Right? But even if they're enslaved to another Israelite temporarily, they still do not lose their land possession permanently. At the Jubilee year, that land goes back to the Israelite to whom it was given as their birthright. Every Israelite, by very nature of their being born into Israel, has a permanent possession in the land of Israel. Okay? All right. Any questions, any comments about that? Anybody? No? Yes? All right. So let's read the sentence one more time. This verse one more time. And the land shall not be sold permanently. It's because the land belongs to me. But you are strangers and sojourners with me. And again, this is now, I think maybe the 4th time we see these two words together. Gerim v'toshavim. Okay? Which implies I think they call it synonymous parallelism. Okay? When you see two words together, then in this kind of parallelism, in this kind of succession, it implies that they mean more or less the same thing. So a ger, we've seen this phrase ger v'toshav a number of times now, even though we saw that toshav really does have a distinct meaning, because a toshav is not allowed, we saw in Exodus chapter 12, a toshav is not allowed to eat of the Passover sacrifice, whereas a ger, once he's circumcised, is allowed to eat of the Passover sacrifice. But we've seen this phrase ger v'toshav a number of times right now, and we can understand that really it's the Torah's way of poetically stating this idea of being a stranger in a strange land, right? So ger, kitty cat, did you poop and now you're calling? Oh boy, oh boy. You are a real little kitten. You are a real little kitten, aren't you? So a stranger and a sojourner are you with me. All right, so let's pay attention to this verse, this phrase, Ger Toshav, okay? Because the rabbis are going to say that Ger Toshav means something different from what they call Ger Tzedek. Hopefully we'll get to that today. All right? All right, let's move on. So that was Leviticus 25:23. No, we don't chew on electrical wires. I had a friend who had these big cats, Maine Coons, if you know what they are. They're huge cats. They're like little lions, right? And we were visiting him. He lived in Germany. We were visiting him, and we saw that he allowed his cats, his huge, full-grown Maine Coons that lived in their small apartment, to chew on the electrical wires. And I said to him, "So what are you doing? You're allowing your cats to chew on the electrical wires? Aren't you afraid they're going to get electrocuted?" I said, "No. If they get a shock, they're gonna learn not to chew on the electrical wires." So they were Maine Coons. Those are huge cats. This little guy is about the size of a peanut, so we're not going to let him chew on electrical wires, are we? We're not going to allow you to chew on electrical wires, are we, Shaham? Huh? Oh, the baby. He's probably I'm guessing about 4 weeks old when we found him. Maybe now 5 weeks old. Sweet little thing. Come, baby. Go. Go. Did you leave? Ugh. You are a real kitty. Okay, so go, sweetheart. Go over there. No, it's not playtime now. No, it's not playtime now. Do you know what the Torah is? Do you know God created you too? You don't even know that, do you? Well, maybe you do somewhere deep down. Okay, so, all right. Right, Leviticus 25:35. Okay. All right. So I'll just read this one in the English and I think we'll move on. If any of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and aren't able to support themselves among you, help them as you would a foreigner and a stranger, so they could continue to live among you. In other words, they kind of have the same rights as actually, maybe we should look at this in the Hebrew. 25:35, Leviticus 25:35. So, in other words, if an Israelite becomes poor, then they're not to be, just as the ger is not to be oppressed, so they're not to be oppressed. Okay? That's basically what this verse is saying, in my opinion. Leviticus 25:35. Let's see what Robert Alter has to say about that one out of curiosity. Okay, 1 second. Good guy, come on. All right, so it's 1033, page 1033. What, Sean? What, baby? What are you looking for? Okay, so Sean, what are you doing, sweetheart? What? You're driving me crazy. Okay, so it doesn't really say what I was looking for. But let's see one other thing. 23. Whoops. No, 35. So she translates it as you shall hold him as a sojourning settler and he shall live under you, right? So the way I understand that, although Robert Alter doesn't explicitly give his opinion on that one, is that if your fellow Israelite becomes poor, then you shall support him or treat him or hold on to him as you would a ger and a toshav, as a stranger and a sojourner. And he shall be supported with you or live with you, okay, or live among you, okay? In other words, the way I understand this verse is that he's not to be oppressed like, let's say, I don't know, like you might oppress an enemy or something like that, or right? He's to be treated, he's to get the same protections that a ger and a toshav would, the same protections that a stranger or a ger would, right? Which we saw that in the Torah that the protections are many, okay? And we have specific laws here, okay? Atikach me'ito neshech, you shall not take from him interest or usury, tarbit, so they translate this as usury or interest. And you shall fear, but you shall fear your God, and your brother shall live with you. Okay. So basically, if your fellow Israelite becomes poor, you're not to oppress him, just as you're not to oppress the ger. Okay, you're to treat him like a ger. You're not to oppress him, and the way you're not to oppress him is you're to support him. And explicitly, you're not to lend him money with interest. He's going to need a loan at that point, right? He's out of money. He's going to need a loan. You don't lend him money with interest. Okay, you lend him interest-free money. Okay. And Leviticus 25:47. Okay. So here we kind of have the same kind of thing. So all of this has to do with, all of these verses have to do with an Israelite, or many of these verses have to do with an Israelite becoming so poor that he can't support himself anymore. And in this case, the Israelite sells himself as a slave to a rich foreigner. Okay, so let's say he borrows money from the ger, and this is kind of the first law that we see that there's a distinction between the Israelite and the ger. So this is Leviticus 25:47. So v'chitasi yad ger, if a ger should get the upper hand, that's usually understood as become very rich. V'toshav even yasid yad ger v'toshav imach, a ger or a toshav. Okay. So again, a ger is a permanent member of the nation of Israel. A toshav is like a green card holder. So a ger would be a naturalized citizen. A toshav would be like a green card holder. Imach umach achicha imo, but your brother goes down under him, goes low before him, v'nimkar leger, and sells himself, or is sold to the ger, right? So you have a native-born Israelite. He becomes poor. There's a ger, a foreigner who becomes rich. The poor Israelite says, okay, the only way I can support myself is I have to sell myself into slavery to the ger, okay? Or the toshav, Okay, and I think in this case it is really making a distinction between the ger and the toshav. Again, the ger is like the naturalized citizen, right? The person who's born outside of the United States but ends up getting United States citizenship, and the toshav is like the green card holder. Okay, and so he sells himself to the ger or the toshav, the naturalized citizen or the green card holder among you, or le'eker mishpachat ager, or to some extended member of the family of the ger. Okay, so the Israelite becomes poor and he sells himself into slavery to the ger. Either he lends money, borrows money from the ger, and then pays him back by becoming his indentured servant, or he just says, I can't support myself, I can't survive, I have to become someone's slave. That's the only way I'll survive. Okay, basically work in return for room and board. Okay, so even after he's sold into slavery to the ger or the toshav, he has the right of there shall be redemption for him. He has the right of redemption. Okay, one of his kin may redeem him. Okay, so what does this mean? And maybe we'll stop after this and we'll go a little bit longer. Okay, what does this mean? This means that the Israelite becomes so poor he can't support himself, so he sells himself to a ger as a slave to says, listen, you just support me, give me room and board, I'll work for you, and I'll be your slave, but I have to survive. Okay, you just support me with room and board. Okay, so his next of kin or his kin, his fellow Israelites, his extended family can come and redeem him, right? They can come to the ger and they can say, listen, okay, I'm giving you $50,000. You release my cousin, and okay, the debt is paid off, or the deal is off, right? We're gonna take him from you, and we're gonna set him up on his own. Okay, so this is in distinction, and what's important here is this is in distinction to an Israelite who sells himself to another Israelite as a slave, or becomes a slave of another Israelite. In that case, there is no right of redemption until the 7th year. That person must work for 6 years, and in the 7th year, that Israelite is freed. Okay, or if it's a foreigner that sells himself as a slave, then there's no right of redemption even after the 7th year. Okay, if a foreigner sells himself as a slave to an Israelite, then that becomes a permanent situation, as far as I can see. What happens with the ger, I'm not 100% sure. We'll have to keep our eyes open and see let's say the ger sells himself to his Israelite as a slave. But what this is basically saying is that an Israelite sells himself as a slave to a ger, then the Israelite's extended family, his family, can come along and buy him out from the ger. The ger really doesn't have any right of ownership over him for any set period of time. Okay, he can be redeemed by his extended family at any time. Okay, and it says o dodo o ben dodo yigalenu. So either his uncle or his cousin may redeem him, or mish'ar basro, or any of the rest of his kin. Mimishpachto, from his extended family, yigalenu, may redeem him, or isiga yado v'nigal, or he may get back on his own feet and redeem himself. Okay, so if an Israelite is enslaved to a ger, there's no set time for that. It's only until he's able to be freed, to be released from that arrangement, either by his family members paying off the ger and setting him up on his own, or by him setting off some money to the side somehow and then buying himself out. Okay? Again, that's in opposition to an Israelite being enslaved to another Israelite. Then there's a set period of time. It's not very long, but there's a set period of time, which is 6 years. On the 7th year, he goes free. Okay? And if a ger, or it's not clear to me still what happens if a ger becomes enslaved to an Israelite, but if a foreigner becomes enslaved to an Israelite, then there's no set time. He doesn't go free after 7 years. It's basically a permanent arrangement. Okay? Okay. And then we go on to some other related laws. Okay, so that's Leviticus 25:49. And Then we have a whole bunch more. But maybe we should just pick it up next week. I think we should pick it up next week. So that gets us through Leviticus. That got us through Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus. And maybe next week we'll pick it up in Numbers. I think I'll continue the same topic next week. And we'll see where it all goes. Okay? So with this, I think I'm going to bring the study to an end. Okay? Let's summarize. The Ger is a permanent member of the nation of Israel who comes from another nation and joins himself to the people of Israel on a permanent basis. He's required to, he has the right, once he circumcises, to bring the Passover offering, and he's also required to keep Yom Kippur, and he's required to follow, at the very least, the important, or he's reminded to keep the most important, some of the most important laws of the Torah, such as having to bring the sacrifice to the tent of meeting, like an Israelite does, such as what were the other ones? I can't remember offhand, but there were a couple of other ones, right? And on the other hand, he's a protected class. Okay, he's not to be oppressed or taken advantage of. He's not to be worked on the Shabbat. The Ger is not to be worked on the Shabbat. He has protections on the Shabbat. He's to be given the same, he's to be left the corners of the field and the gleanings of the harvests. He's to be given the same judgment if he's attacked, right? He's not to be, it's the payment to him is not to be less just because he's a Ger. So he has special protections, just like the almanah and the yatom do, just like the widow and the orphan do, okay? So those are the two things we saw, verses we could say of inclusion, okay? That he's part of the nation of Israel with many of the same, but not all. We haven't gotten to some of the laws where there are distinctions. We got to one right now, okay? So with many of the same law obligations as an Israelite, but not all, as we shall see, okay? On the other hand, he's a protected class. He's not to be taken advantage of. He's not to be oppressed. He's to rest on the Shabbat. Okay. He also does not have a land inheritance, whereas an Israelite always has a land inheritance, even if the Israelite loses it. It was, as we saw in Leviticus 25, it goes back to that Israelite in the Jubilee year. Okay. So the Ger is a protected class, specifically because he's coming from a foreign land. He doesn't have the same roots in the land of Israel that a native-born Israelite does. He doesn't have the same family connections, so he's a protected class, okay? In addition to having obligations, he's not allowed to sacrifice to Molech, of course. So in addition to having some of the basic obligations that the Israelite does, okay? On the other hand, we're constantly reminded that we were Gerim, okay? We were Gerim first when Abraham left Mesopotamia and came to Haran, right? He went to a foreign land, okay, and then eventually to the land of Canaan. He was a Ger and a Toshav there, as he says to the Hittites when he's buying the cave of Machpelah, right? In Genesis 15, we saw that Abraham is told that his descendants, his seed, are going to be Gerim. They're going to be strangers in a strange land, in a land where they're going to be oppressed and enslaved. That's Egypt, right? We saw that Moshe names his own son Gershom. I am a stranger there, because he says I was a stranger in a strange land, meaning he even had to leave Egypt, which was already a strange land for him, and go to Midian, which was even a stranger land. Okay, so we're constantly reminded that we are Gerim, and not to forget all of the times that we were strangers, that we were not, set up permanently in our land, right? That we were in the same position, and therefore we should not oppress the Ger. We should not take advantage of or oppress the foreigner that comes to us, and also we should not think that we own the land, right? Ger Toshav Aita Imadi. Okay, you should remember that you are a sojourner and a settler with me, and therefore you cannot buy the land from another Israelite permanently. It goes back to that Israelite in the Jubilee year. So that's a third kind of verse we have, the reminders that Israelites were Gerim. So first, okay, inclusion of the Ger in many of the most important aspects of being part of the nation of Israel. Okay, don't sacrifice to foreign gods. Bring the sacrifice to the tent of meeting. Keep Yom Kippur. Bring the Passover sacrifice once you're circumcised. Okay. Second type of verses: do not the ger is a protected status, cannot work on the Shabbat. The edges of the field, the corners of the field, and the gleanings are to be left from him. He's not to be oppressed. He's like the widow and the orphan is not to be oppressed. And the third type is to remember that we Israelites were gerim. We were sojourners, first in Canaan, then in Egypt, and even Moses was in Midian. And so we should not remember our humble beginnings, and therefore we should not oppress or take advantage of the stranger that comes to us. Okay. And again, the stranger that comes to us is someone who comes to us permanently and wants to be a permanent part of the nation of Israel, right? As Ruth says, well, let's look at it for a second. Ruth 2:16. Ruth. $1.16. So Ruth, so Naomi is saying to Ruth and Orpah, go back to Moab. You have nothing, no future coming with me. Okay, there's no future ahead of you in Israel. V'tomer Ruth, and Ruth said, Al tivcha'i, do not press upon me, do not nudge me, to leave you, lashuv me'acharayich, and to go back from before you. In other words, to turn away from you. Ki el asher tilchi elech, because wherever you go, I'm going. Ubasher talini alin, and wherever you lay your head, rest your head, wherever you sleep, I will sleep. Amech ami, your people are my people, ve'elohayich Elohai, and your God is my God. Okay? Basher tamuti amut, and where you die, I shall die. Basher v'sham akaber, and there even I'll be buried. Ko yaseh Yahweh li, so shall Yahweh do me. V'ko yosif, ki hamavet yafrid beini ubenech, and even more so, if even death should separate between you and me. So basically, Ruth is saying to Naomi, don't even try. Okay, my heart is so set. Okay, I'm going with you. Okay, I'm going back to Israel. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. I've made my decision. Okay, and that's what a ger is. Okay, a ger is not just someone who happens to live in the land of Israel, like let's say the Arabs or the Armenians. Okay, those are not gerim. Okay, because they don't say your God is my God. Your people are my people. Okay. In fact, quite the opposite, right? Many of them, not all, many of them hate the people of Israel. Okay, even the Armenians have no great love for the Jewish people, I can tell you. Okay, even though they're more quiet about it. Okay, they basically side with the Arabs more or less, and the Arabs for sure don't. That's not a ger. Okay, just because you live in the land of Israel does not make you a ger. We saw other statuses of people who live in the land of Israel, such as the Toshav and the Sachir. Okay, the Toshav is again like the green card holder, someone who lives for permanently in the land but is not really a citizen. And the Sachir is like a B1 visa holder, like someone who's in the land on a work visa or something like that. And there are also enemies in the land, right? We saw that when the Canaanites lived in the land of Israel, when Israel entered, and they were certainly not gerim, they were enemies to be destroyed, right? So just because someone happens to physically be living in the land of Israel, living among the Jews, does not mean they're a ger. A ger is someone who has joined their lot into the nation of Israel, in with the people of Israel, who said, your people are my people, your God is my God. Where you go, I will go. Where you lay your head, I will lay my head. That is what a ger is. Okay, and that is an extreme level of commitment and self-sacrifice. And such people, such gerim, they are now required to keep the important laws of the nation of Israel. They have special protections under the law. Okay, and we're not to take advantage of them. We're not to oppress them, and we're always to remember that we were strangers in a strange land, and so therefore we're not to to oppress or take advantage of the Ger, the one who really loves and wants to be part of the people of Israel in our land. Okay, the Toshav, the Sachir, the Nochri, they all have different statuses. Okay, the ones who have not joined themselves permanently to land, and certainly the enemies who live in the land have a completely different status. We won't even get into that. Okay, that's just common sense. Okay, but the Ger, someone who said, "Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Where you go, I will go. Where you lay your head, I will lay my head. Okay, where you die, I will die, and I'll be buried right next to you as well." That someone who can really say that from the heart, that's a Ger. And then we have another status, which is what I like to call, I don't know if it's the official term, but a nirweh, and that's like an outside supporter or an outside an ally, right? Someone who has chosen Yahweh to be his God or her God, someone who wants to support the people of Israel, who supports the mission of the people of Israel, who wants to attach themselves to the people of Israel, but does not want to go all the way to be a Ger, does not want to get the black belt, right, level of commitment to the covenant of the Torah, does not want to eventually move to the land of Israel and be like a Ger, really 100% part of the Jewish people. Someone who says, I love the Torah, I love Yahweh, I love the mission of the people of what the mission of the people of Israel is, even though they're not always doing it correctly, but I love the theory of their mission. But you know what? I'm an American. I'm always going to be American. Or I'm a Frenchman. I'm always going to be a Frenchman. I need my croissants and my beret tipped to the side, and I need to sit in my cafe and listen to accordion music. Okay, that's who I am. But I really, want to support. I want to be an ally of the people of Israel. That's a nilweh, and that's actually the vast majority of people I've met in the world who have said they want to be Karaite or have said they are interested in becoming a Karaite. So I ask each person, to do self-introspection. Are you really a Ger? Are you really ready to go all out? Are you ready to pick up your life and eventually move to the land of Israel and really be 100% part of the people of Israel? Or are you, which is just as respectable, as I said, I have just immense respect and a love for people from other nations who are niluim, who are allies or supporters of the people of Israel. These are incredible, incredible people, right? But they have decided, I still want to be an Indian. I still want to be a Chinese. I want to live in Beijing. I want to live in Mumbai, right? I want to live in Tempe, Arizona, whatever the case may be. But I love the Torah. I love Yahweh. I want to celebrate the festivals along with Israel. I want to learn the Torah, and when the end of days comes, I want to be thrown in with the lot of Israel. In other words, I want to attach myself to the people of Israel, to the God of Israel, and to the Torah of Israel. That is a nirweh. That is a supporter or an ally who retains his identity in his nation, but is attached to the nation of Israel as, shall we say, a supporter or an ally, as I've used those phrases now a bunch of times. Okay, so we have the Ger, we have the nirweh, the supporter or ally, the Ger, the convert, the nirweh, the supporter or ally. We have the Toshav, the green card holder who happens to live in the land of Israel, but has not made any kind of commitment to be part of the nation of Israel. We have the Sachir, the B-1 visa worker who comes for seasonal work or comes for a period to work in the land of Israel. And we have the Nochri. The Nochri is the foreigner who has no connection whatsoever to the nation of Israel. Like, I don't know, the atheistic, person who lives in, Korea or something, North Korea, is no, well, it's not their fault. They don't know. They're hidden, but whatever, someone who has no interest in the nation of Israel or no knowledge of the nation of Israel, that's the Nochri. And then we have enemies, right? We have the Oyev, the enemy of the people of Israel, who live either in the land of Israel, and there are no shortage of them, or who live elsewhere, and just for whatever reason hate the God of Israel, hate the Torah of Israel, and hate the people of Israel, right? That's the status, right? And as I said at the beginning, everyone needs to know their status. Everyone in Israel, and maybe even in the world, needs to know needs to know their name, their rank, and their serial number. Even within Israel, there's a hierarchy. There's a status that each person has. Okay, if you're of the sons of Yosef, then you have a different status than if you're of the descendant of the sons of one of the concubines. That's just the way it is. If you're a Ger, then you have a different status than if you're a Kohen. That's just the way it is, right? There are these concentric circles, as I said, with the innermost circle being the Kohen, the Levites, the sons of Joseph, the Davidic dynasty, or the sons of Yehuda, the descendants of Yehuda, especially the descendants of through David, the prophets and the judges. Again, the prophets and the judges were one before it broke up into prophets and kings. That's a different story. Then on the next outer concentric circle, you have the rest of the tribes, who are the children of Leah and the children of Rachel, so Binyamin and all the other children of Leah. Then on the next one, you have the children of the concubines. And then on the next outer concentric circle, you have the Gerim. And then outside the Gerim, you have the Nirwim. And then outside the Nirwim, you have the Nochrim, right? And that kind of is the conception of the world as I see it in the Torah. And we didn't mention the Toshav and the Safir, but they're basically, they just happen to live in the land of Israel. But eventually, in a certain sense, they're kind of like, I guess, Nochrim or maybe Nirwim, right? Their physical location just happens to be in the land of Israel. So that's the way I see it. And I think everything we've seen so far in the Torah, we've gotten again through Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus, has supported that. I think so, at any rate. But maybe you have different opinions. Please let me know, either in comments. You can email me. You can text me on WhatsApp. You can join our WhatsApp group, whatever you want to do. But I think we're going to leave it for there. So I thank you all for joining me. If there are any other last questions or comments, please let me know. If not, we're going to leave the topic, and I think we're going to pick it up next week. Instead of going back to the Parsha, I think I'd like to do this topic for at least 1, maybe 2 more weeks. So I thank you all for joining me. This has been Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and hope you enjoyed the study. To me, this is one of the most fascinating, topics out there, because I think there's so much misunderstanding regarding it. How do I do this? Wrong button. There's so much misunderstanding regarding it, right? And there's so much, I don't know, how can I say, emotions attached to it. And there's so many agendas. Okay, so we have this one Karaite going around telling all the Nilwim that they're actually Gerim, that they're actually Karaites. We have the rabbis who say there's no distinction whatsoever between a Ger and an Ezrach. And we have all kinds of different people with different agendas, putting their 2 cents into this topic. And what I would like to do is just, I guess, set the record straight from the point of view of how I see the Torah puts it forth and understands it. I hope I'm right. This is, I've been studying this topic for many, many years. There may be things that I'm not right about, and I'm always open to people showing me where they think I've made a mistake. My only goal at the end of the day is to understand the will of Yahweh, to understand his Torah, to understand the Tanach, and to understand, what he wants of us and what it is we're supposed to do. So with that being said, I'll end the study for today. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. And yeah, exactly. Is that something like me? I would say so. I would say that's exactly where you fit in. A supporter, I think now the modern word that the kids like to use is an ally. I think that's what the millennials or Generation Z or whatever the heck they are use. So yes, I would say that's exactly where you fit in at this point. Maybe someday you'll decide, listen, I want to be a Gera. I want to really throw my lot into the people of Israel. I want to be 100% part of the people of Israel. Who knows? Maybe you'll make that decision one day, and maybe you won't. And if you don't, that's totally 100% fine. The fact that you are a follower, or that one is a follower of Yahweh and wants to know what his will is in this world, is already an amazing, 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 incredible thing. And I don't think anyone ever needs to do anything more than that, unless something deep in their heart calls them to do it. And then it's a huge, huge commitment. So with that being said, I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavuot Tov. Chag Shavuot Sameach. Shavuot starts tonight at sunset and continues until tomorrow night, until after sunset, I like to say. I think until total darkness, or as the rabbis like to say, Chovim. I think they're actually just about right with that. And so I wish everybody Shabbat Shalom, a Shavuot Tov, a Chag Shavuot, a happy Pentecost, a happy Shavuot. And with the help of Yahweh, we'll see you all again next week. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach.